What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch here, live for your NFL free agency team plans. It's been a while since I've been live. I appreciate everybody watching the content as we transition during this NFL calendar from post-Super Bowl to NFL free agency, which you guys know if you follow the channel. If you are subscribed to the BLV, you understand that free agency is a great time on this channel and that you know that I love free agency just about more than anything in the NFL and throughout the NFL calendar. So in this video, I want to approach each AFC team, and we're going to have a separate video for the NFC where I go through each and every AFC team and I establish the needs that I believe are their top 5 needs on their roster, offensively, defensively. Some teams, it was difficult to really narrow it down to 5. I will bring up if I see other areas of need that stand out. And I definitely want your guys' help. If you are a fan of a team, then let me know in the comments if I missed something, a need that you think is very important to address, a specific position, a specific maybe niche role on the team that you think they could upgrade. Let me know in the comments, and that's why I'm going live. I'm also going live to answer any of your questions about these AFC teams. So remember, 5 top needs. I'm going to play GM, and I'm going to riff on what I believe this team needs to do to upgrade this offseason, specifically through free agency. We're going to get to the draft down the road, but specifically looking at free agents that they can sign to help address their needs this offseason. So if that sounds good, and if you are ready to rumble, then make sure you do spike that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more BLV just like this. And also, spike that notification bell. I've noticed that, some videos you guys are really supporting and watching, and I appreciate that. There are other videos that seem to be missing. So if you're missing those videos, make sure that you have spike the notification bell so that you do get the latest upload and you're also notified when I do go live. So this is your free agency team plans, all 32 teams, but specifically in this video, I'm going to focus on the 16 AFC teams. And then I might release each individual division on top of that as well. So, if you've spiked the like button, let's get to it. Let's begin with the AFC East. As I always do, I tend to go from AFC East through NFC West, and tomorrow we'll end with the NFC West. What's going on, everybody? Let me know how you're doing. Let me know how you're feeling in the comments. What's up, Isaac? How's it going, Connor? Basketball and football moments. He changed his name. That is awesome. I see that. Thank you guys for joining, and thank you guys for spiking that like button. Also, if you guys want, you can follow me on social media. You could follow me on Twitter at Mitch Milani. You could follow our Instagram at TheBottomLineView. You can also follow me on Instagram if you want, at Mitch Milani. I don't post a ton, but you can follow me if you like. Okay. So let's get going. I do recommend Twitter if you want to follow me. That's where I mostly am active. Also, you can join our community Discord for free agency reactions and just community thought. There's a lot of people that are a lot of different fans of a lot of different teams. And if you want to react with those people, check out the Discord. Link is in the description. We have almost 400 people in there, I believe. So let's start with the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills are the favorites to go to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl this season. So obviously, I don't have to really tell you that they have one of the best rosters in the NFL. Clearly, Vegas believes that they have one of the best rosters in the NFL. And when you're looking at their team and what I think they need to do to go over the top. So the Buffalo Bills, we've heard from Sean McDermott, and I believe this is going to be something that they really have to hammer. Sean McDermott has stated that they want to upgrade their team speed. They have come out and said this publicly. And whenever a team says something publicly, usually they try to address it in a massive way. It's not just with one move or with a couple moves. Usually that team hammers that approach. So what does he mean by team speed? I mean, that could really be anything. My biggest guess would be on the defensive side of the football, specifically in the secondary, because their biggest competition over the past couple of years in that AFC has been the Kansas City Chiefs. And with a guy like Tyreek Hill, who's been the real issue for them, who they just can't seem to stop, they need somebody to cover him, and they also need just generally faster pursuit to the ball carrier, faster pursuit and tackling, and just in that coverage, faster cornerbacks and players that can convert from zone, which they play a lot of, to also playing some man when they need to. And that has been a flaw of that defense for the 4 or 5 years since Sean McDermott has gotten there, and they've really worked under this whole regime. I feel like they've been an excellent zone coverage team, but whenever they do have to play teams man-to-man, they have struggled in that department, specifically without obviously Tre'Davious White last season, but they were so close to not only beating the Chiefs, but also winning the Super Bowl. So it's not a ton of huge things in this department on this team, but when we go from offense to defense, as I'm going to do with every team, and you guys can see the top 5 teams on the lower third there, or top 5 needs, I should say, you start with the offense, and I think you start with the offensive line. I think they definitely need to look at protecting Josh Allen, specifically in the middle. So the guard position, they've got Mitch Morse at center, who's still locked and loaded for a bit, who they've signed, I believe, a couple years ago, pretty long term. He's still a solid player. I wouldn't call him an elite center, but he's somewhere in that 10 to 15 range, I would assume. The guard position could certainly use an upgrade, specifically at left guard. They do have a free agent at left guard. So Deion Dawkins. You've got Darrell Williams, who played right guard last year a lot, but could also play right tackle because he's played both positions. But Spencer Brown spent a lot of time playing right tackle, I should say, which I'm not sure if that's their future plans or not. If you guys know for sure, then let me know what their future plans are at right tackle. I would assume Darrell Williams is the better player at that position, so maybe even upgrading both the guard positions wouldn't be a bad idea. I do think they could do that throughout the draft. You know, you can find quality guards in the 2nd, 3rd round, maybe even the 4th round at times if you're good at drafting those positions. But I also look at the guard position in this free agency, and I see a lot of like marginal upgrades for a lot of teams. So this is going to be a common theme for me throughout these free agency team game plans, but there's a lot of guards out there, and I'm just going to pull up my guard list. There's a lot of guards up there that I feel like can contribute to teams this season. So even when you get past the first level of guys of like the Brandon Scherfs and the Tomlinsons and the Connor Williams, there's guys like Ted Karras from the Patriots that are out there, AJ Cann, Michael Schofield, Trey Turner, Alex Kappa I think is a really good one, honestly. Andrew Norwell is a veteran who would be actually a very nice addition. So if I was looking specifically at the Bills, this is a team in the Super Bowl window, I'd be trying to aim for a guy like Andrew Norwell specifically to come in. Very good pass protector from the Jags, very consistent player. I would call him, in probably not in the like top 10 guards, but he's somewhere in that 2nd tier now. He's no longer elite. He used to be a very good player, but he's always maintained a really good pass protection. He also used to play in Carolina, and obviously the Bills have many connections to Carolina. So Andrew Norwell would be a nice free agent addition at the guard position. Wide receiver, I do think they could use some help. Isaiah McKenzie and Emmanuel Sanders are both free agents. I do think you could aim to get younger at the position, with obviously Cole Beasley getting a little bit older. Adding a younger player in, like, let's say the 2nd or the 3rd round, maybe later, the 3rd round might not be a bad idea, but just getting that quality number 4 receiver. And I could see Buffalo going the approach of aiming at a lower tier free agent and then also bringing in a younger receiver as well. So pairing that kind of strategy together to help the depth of the wide receiver position, because Cole Beasley did regress last year and he's continuing to regress. I think it would be wise to sign Isaiah McKenzie and have him play more next year, but I do think that they could add to wide receiver and just generally get faster at wide receiver. That wouldn't be a bad idea. Running back, they could use an upgrade, but they They do have Devin Singletary and Zach Moss still on the roster, and they're not free agents, so it's not a pressing need. The same could be said about tight end. They could sign Rob Gronkowski, who there's been rumors floated out there for him, but Dawson Knox is not a free agent. He's on the team, so there's no real pressing need for either position. It would be nice, though, for them to get a game-changing running back. I know Saquon has been floated out there as a potential trade. Personally, I don't think they should be trying to invest a lot of capital into a running back, but bringing in a nice pass catcher specifically at the running back position, wouldn't be a bad idea. Maybe somebody like Jerick McKinnon wouldn't be a bad signing. Somebody of that like Matt Breida level that they got last year, but hopefully just hit better than Matt Breida did last year. For whatever reason, never really had a role on the team. Defensively is really where they've got a lot more needs, but you look at the interior defensive line is going to definitely need some work. Harrison Phillips is a free agent. Vernon Butler is a free agent. Justin Zimmer is a free agent. F.A. Obata is a free agent. So all these guys are free agents, and all of them play mostly inside. They still got Ed Oliver, who's kind of their big time player, I guess, in the inside. Although he's not fantastic, but he's a starter. And they got Star Lotulelei, who's getting up there in age. I'm not sure if they're going to cut him. I'm not exactly sure about that. He doesn't play a ton, but he has been important to their run defense in recent seasons when he's on or off the field. Their edge position, Jerry Hughes is a free agent and Mario Addison is a free agent. So both of those guys have been key contributors for them last year, and obviously Jerry Hughes for many seasons has been their best pass rusher. Gregory Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, these guys are on the team. And, obviously young Basham Jr. as well could take a bigger step forward next year. But I think they're going to expect a lot from Rousseau moving forward and Ed Oliver moving forward. But this is a team that definitely needs to look at some veteran additions on the D-line. I would love for them to get a difference-making edge rusher if they could. If they had the maneuverability, obviously they don't have a lot of cap space, but it would be really nice for them to get like a superstar D-end. A lot of teams could use a superstar D-end, and hopefully that's what Gregory Rousseau ends up becoming, but he's not that right now. He does look pretty good, but they're probably going to get Jerry Hughes back. I wouldn't be shocked by that, but they could also use another layer behind that. I thought their pass rush was actually pretty good last year, and they could use a little bit more size in the middle of their defense for when they play teams like the Colts and they play teams like the Patriots, who are going to try to run you over. So, having the extra big body in the middle is definitely something that you could get for cheap, and something that I feel like would definitely be something I would address. So looking at the interior defenders on the list, you've got obviously the big names of Campbell and Hicks, but moving past that, I think somebody like, let's just say, obviously you got Harrison Phillips, who's solid, but, maybe you could go out and sign a Sue, right? Maybe you could sign an Ndamukong Suh to be a rotation player. He's older. He still can play, though. Or like, Linval Joseph. There's a lot of guys here that are older that would want to play on a team like the Bills that want to win a Super Bowl, obviously. These guys can come in and defend the run well and blow up the run when you need that to take place. Edge rushers, looking at the edge rusher list here, you've got, who would be a nice fit here? I would just think maybe you could look at like Justin Houston, Melvin Ingram, who actually played pretty well for the Chiefs. I don't think they have enough money to really go out there and get the big names, obviously, so I'm trying to look at more manageable. JPP, Arden Key, maybe. Dante Fowler, maybe you could rejuvenate him. That wouldn't be a bad, low-risk sort of signing. Linebacker, they're good. They've got Edmonds and Milano, and they've also got A.J. Klein, so they've got 3 linebackers there that can play. Cornerback position could certainly use some speed. I think they're going to look to get young at that position, probably draft that position. But there are some free agents that they can target. And like I said, their common theme this offseason is going to be speed, team speed, specifically in the back end. So cornerback position. Let's say a guy like, because you got to be able to fit their system. But they've had Levi Wallace for a lot of seasons, and I'm not sure if he's going to come back. But maybe you take a chance on a guy like Dante Jackson. Very fast, very raw, has some talent. Another Carolina guy. There you go. So, has the basis for the scheme, obviously. I believe he was there with Ron Rivera for at least 1 year. I think they drafted him. So somebody like that, maybe they could try to take a gamble on like a Bryce Callahan, but I do feel like their nickel position is solid. Maybe it could be a little bit better, but they're really looking for that number 2 corner on the opposite side of Tre'Davious White. So taking chances on, a guy like Dante Jackson might not be a bad target for them. Somebody like that. So that's the Bills. Not a ton of needs, but like I said, a lot of team speed, trying to address speed in the back end, specifically trying to get more veteran pass rushers and adding to that rotation, getting a big guy inside to help stop the run. Offensively, you want to add that number 4, number 5, that depth of receiver, and hopefully a guy that can take Cole Beasley's spot down the road. And then really trying to upgrade, finding the diamonds in the rough at the guard position would be nice. So that's kind of the theme for the Bills, one of the better teams in the NFL, and I assume will do a good job this free agency as they have for many seasons in a row. All right, let's get to the New England Patriots, guys. What's up, Natasha, Jake? Basketball and football moments. Thanks, guys, for joining. Durkant, Jake, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, hope you're doing good, brother. You hear about Gronk maybe going to Buffalo. So carrying over that Buffalo conversation. Thank you, Jake, for the $5, man. You're the man. Thank you guys for the super chats. Yes, I've heard about it, and it's interesting. I think, and Ultra sent me it, and he was like, "Oh, you would be mad about this, basically, right?" And I was like, "No, I actually like the Bills. I know that's weird to say. I'm a Patriots fan, but I really like the Bills because I think Josh Allen is amazing. I've always been a Josh Allen guy. So, I think the Bills are a really, really good football team. And if Gronk wants to go there, he's got a great quarterback. I think he would fit in. I think he would be a big target for them. And he could win another Super Bowl there. So, and it's also his hometown team. So, thinking about you as a fan, what would it be like to play for your hometown team, the team that you grew up with, the team that you cheered for? That would be pretty cool. So for anybody to go there, you got to think outside the box unselfishly. I think that would be a good move for Gronk and for the team, personally. So let's look at the New England Patriots. Of course, my team of choice. And I don't even know why I'm scrolling to their depth chart as if I don't know every single player on the team. But I am anyways. So we've got the New England Patriots, and they did a lot of work in last free agency. So I think this free agency in a lot of ways, I don't know if it's more interesting than last year, right? But it is very interesting because last year they kind of went all in and just tried to establish and impact as many positions as humanly possible and try to upgrade as many positions as humanly possible, just throwing money at people. Like Nelson Aguilar, here's a bunch of money to play receiver. Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, Van Noy, come back. We need you. Matt Judon, be our edge rusher. Jalen Mills. We're just going to throw money at people. And this offseason, it's a little bit different. They have money, and I do think their cap space is going to increase when they restructure some contracts and things. So they're going to have some flexibility with what they do. But I do think there's definitely more clear targets this offseason than last offseason. Last offseason was establishing the basis of what they need. We need some talent, period, last offseason, right? We need edge rushers, we need tight ends, we need wide receivers, we need O-linemen, we need this, we need that. So Belichick's just getting these guys. And now it's okay, we need these specific upgrades. And that's how we take it to the next level. We're figuring out kind of who we are and the guys that can play well for us. But now we need those specific upgrades. And as you guys can see, the biggest needs on the team. Let's start offensively, wide receiver. Now, my biggest hunch here is that they're going to go towards the draft at the wide receiver position and probably address wide receiver multiple times in the draft. Twice, potentially, I would think, with one early pick in the first or second round and then one later pick in the 6th or 7th round. Somebody in that top 4 group at wide receiver and somebody near the end that they feel can contribute, because they've already spent a bunch of money on the receiving core when you include the tight ends and you include Nelson Aguilar. Nelson Aguilar is going to be on the team this year. I would find it, it would be challenging for him to not be on the team. I still think he's a good player. I don't think he was correctly utilized on the team. But he adds speed, he adds a vertical threat, and he's a consistent receiver. He's just not a number one. And I think he's looked at as more really the number 3 option in this receiving game at the wide receiver position when you consider Kendrick Bourne could really become, a nice number 2 this year. I think he might even become the number 1 receiver on this team. He really had that type of impact and that type of chemistry with Mac Jones. Is he, a talent that you usually would say is a number 1 receiver? No, but like in the past, guys like Deion Branch and those sort of guys, Troy Brown, Kendrick Bourne fits into that mold of that type of guy that could, just be a very reliable target for that quarterback and build chemistry with that guy. So Kendrick Bourne's kind of a home run for this team from last offseason. And I think Nelson will be on the team. Nelson Aguilar will be on the team for 1 more year, and then they'll probably move on from him after this year, just given the way his contract is structured. Jacoby Myers is still there, who's a nice middle of the field slot receiver. He's not a vertical threat. He's not very fast, but he is reliable. He's a good route runner. So he's a nice number 3, number 2 option. And really behind that, obviously, N'Keal Harry's going to be gone. There's no question. Gunnar Olszewski, I don't know if he's going to be on the team, to be honest with you. It's rather as a punt returner or he's gone. They could look to free agency, but I do think free agency is going to be more so like some of the diamonds in the rough at wide receiver are just kind of taking shots at guys. So, maybe they try to target Braxton Berrios, who went to the Jets. They cut him, went to the Jets. They didn't want to cut him. They actually chose Gunnar over him, which was a mistake. And then he goes to the Jets and actually is been pretty good for them. They could target, guys like Russell Gage, Keelan Cole, if they want to add speed, Valdez Scantling, Will Fuller, these type of guys, maybe even Juju. I could see them targeting Juju. He's kind of their type of receiver, but I don't expect them to try to target Adams, Godwin, Mike Williams, Allen Robinson, Odell, maybe Odell, because Belichick has an infatuation with him. But other than that, I don't really see them going all out for a big receiver. I think like the lower tier guys, maybe they'll take a swing at, but I think they're going to look to the draft for wide receiver just because it might be a bit pricey at that position to upgrade in free agency. On the offensive line, which New England loves to put a lot of capital into offensive line, Isaiah Wynn is still there, at least for 1 more season. I think this is his 5th-year option this year. Trent Brown is a free agent, which is their biggest priority in my opinion. I do believe that Ted Karras will end up walking and going somewhere else because my guess is that they're going to have Michael Onwenu slide into guard and take over for Ted Karras and then have Trent Brown playing at right tackle and then probably trying to find the next Ted Karras as like a backup type that can play a bunch of positions with a cheaper contract. So my guess is Trent Brown will be back and they'll move on from Ted Karras and Michael Onwenu will take over at guard, which in case would create one of the best offensive lines in football. Jonnu Smith's not leaving. I know a lot of fans kind of upset with his production, but he'll be around at least for 1 more year. I just think the change in offense might be interesting to see if he develops in the system in his 2nd year. Running back's good. It would be nice to have James White back, or if they don't get James White back, they're going to look to probably draft a running back with the same sort of skill set. It doesn't appear that J.J. Taylor is going to be that type of guy. Brandon Bolden's also a free agent. He'll be back if he wants to play. Defensively, this is actually where I think the team has a lot more needs. Really, when you look at the offense, a lot of the players are going to be back. It's really just Trent Brown that's a free agent. That's a big deal to me. Other than that, everybody else is there. They just could add some players to it through the draft or free agency. Now, on defense, they've got some actual significant names that are free agents. So you're talking about the whole linebacker position of Jamie Collins, Dante Hightower, Jawan Bentley. So they really have an opportunity, in my opinion. Belichick does, and this is going to be fascinating because Belichick's a defensive guy. He typically makes really, really intelligent defensive personnel moves and typically sees where defense is going before everybody else. And this has been one of the biggest and best things about Belichick, the GM. He's very good at kind of figuring out where the NFL is and addressing his defense in that way. I do think there is a strong chance that Belichick completely redoes and remakes his linebacking core. You could see them re-signing, Hightower back to like a 1-year low money contract because of the respect and the leadership factor. But I don't see Bentley coming back. I'd be surprised, honestly. I don't think Collins will be back, even though I thought he played okay. And they've got the weird thing is they've got some younger players at edge that I don't really think have panned out. But like Winovich and Uche have shown sparks and flashes, but they haven't necessarily been consistent. So I'm not sure if they're going to look to that position, but they have all those players coming back. So I'm not necessarily sure they're going to target that position, but definitely linebacker, looking to upgrade team speed at the linebacker position, specifically guys that can cover would be my guess. The corner position, obviously you start with JC Jackson, who is a free agent. I want him back. If I was the GM, I would sign him to whatever contract the guy needs. He's arguably the best corner in the NFL. He's only 25 or 26 years old. He is an absolute stud. Can really fit any system. I've seen a lot of Patriots fans with some slander towards JC Jackson, and I don't understand it at all. I'm not sure if they watch the guy or... Here's the problem. I don't think they watch other cornerbacks. I think they expect everybody to be Darrelle Revis and Ty Law in their prime. And JC might not be there yet, but he could get there, which is the scary thing about letting him go because he is so young. This was his best year, and I think he was he an all-pro? He was at least close. So JC Jackson is going to get a big contract no matter where he goes. My guess would be he comes back, but I'm not 100% sure about that, and I am definitely fearing a day where he leaves because I remember the days when the Patriots stunk at corner, and it was not fun. Devin McCourty, if he wants to play, will be back. I have no question about that. I think he rather retires or he remains a Patriot. I can't really see him leaving. There's no real point to him leaving, to be honest with you. He has 3 Super Bowls. I don't think he's chasing a ring. I think he just wants to play for the fun, of it. And I don't think he would go anywhere else. He's a Patriot, and that's kind of his legacy. So I don't really see him leaving. But you've got Adrian Phillips and Kyle Duggar who are kind of foundational to this defense. But when you look at this defense and what they've got to do, you've got to address speed at the second level, linebacker. You've got to get depth at corner, specifically perimeter corner. I think having Jonathan Jones back is going to be huge, but then also having guys like Jalen Mills and Miles Bryant who can play the nickel position are nice to have behind that. So you have a layer of depth at the nickel position. So I don't think nickel is necessarily the problem. It's what happens if, you do lose, let's say one of your top 3 corners. And last year, the problem was they didn't have the depth that they had in the past because they let go of Gilmore and then Jonathan Jones got hurt. Clearly, Jawan Williams isn't an answer here. He could be gone. I don't think he's going to make the team next year. And you really don't have a lot of answers unless Sean Wade becomes that answer. So you're looking at corners in free agency, in my opinion. So I don't think it's really good enough for the Patriots to go out there and just sign JC back. I think they've got to go out there and try to attack the depth of this position. Obviously with guys that can play, a good mix of man and zone, but probably more man. I think a good target would be somebody like Charvarius Ward of the Kansas City Chiefs. I think would be a very good number 2 corner. He's kind of been their number 1 corner a lot of times. You could look towards the draft as well, high in the draft, but that would probably only come if JC leaves. I don't really think they're going to put a ton of capital in there if he doesn't. You never know, though, because the Patriots have really looked at the corner position very highly in the past and tried to establish that very, very much so in the past. So the corner position is huge for them, and I would look for them to really try to attack that. But mostly the team, it just comes down to the 2 big re-signings of Trent Brown and JC Jackson. Everyone else is kind of come or go. Devin McCourty obviously would be nice to have back. Everybody else I wouldn't really care. But getting receivers, getting corners, and linebacker speed. And that's pretty much it. Everything else, can probably be, you got Christian Barmore, who's going to get better. You've got some younger players like Josh Uche, who probably play a bigger role. Matt Judon's there again. Kyle Van Noy's still there. Kyle Duggar's going to take a step forward. This team's got a pretty solid roster. They've just got a couple spots where they've got to improve, specifically on the perimeter of their offense and their defense. And if they can do that, they could be a real player in the AFC if Mac takes a step forward, which you're counting on moving forward. Because some people may say they need to add to their run defense. I don't think I don't think you really need to, unless you cut like Lawrence Guy and then you try to replace him with somebody else. They could go with that. His contract's definitely movable. But having Godshaw, Wise, Guy, Barmore, these guys are all on the team still. So I think that's more of a approach thing, a coaching approach thing. I think the secondary and the linebacker level, having speed and coverage is more important to me in this day and age, especially when you play the Bills twice a year. You got to compete with the Chiefs. You got to compete with Herbert. You got to compete with Joe Burrow. So pass coverage is way more important to me at this point for the Patriots. All right. Before we get to the Dolphins, Jake, thank you so much for another super sticker. Thank you, Jake. Thank you guys, by the way, for tuning in live. If you haven't already, make sure you do Gronk spike that like button. All right, the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins are going to be real interesting because for the first time in a couple of years, they have a new coach and a new regime. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But you have to think, when you think about new regimes, got to think about the old teams that they were a part of. And this is a common theme in the NFL nowadays. They try to replicate what the other team did well. Because usually when a coach is hired, he's coming from a place of success, right? And Mike McDaniel's coming from a place of the 49ers. So he's coming from a place of success under Kyle Shanahan. So when you try to look at the Dolphins, you've got to say, how is Mike McDaniel going to try to replicate the 49ers with the Dolphins? It's not going to be exactly the same, but he's going to look for key elements of that team to bring forth to Miami. So we look at the offensive side of the football, and everybody knows where I'm going to go with this one. Offensive line, offensive line, offensive line. So I think you start at the tackle position. Eichenberg was a high pick last year, second-round pick. I believe was he out of Notre Dame? But a second-round pick, and going to be interesting to see because Austin Jackson was also a first-round pick. So they've spent multiple high picks on the tackle position in recent years. They also spent one on Robert Hunt, which I believe started as a tackle and moved inside to guard. Robert Hunt has become a good player. Eichenberg, it's questionable. I think if they could get a Armstead or get a big-time free agent at tackle, and specifically ones that are mobile, like they can move in space, because you want to be able to run that zone scheme. So maybe not necessarily the Trent Browns of the world or the Orlando Browns of the world. But, obviously Armstead would be good in any system. But guys like that can move better. When you look at the Niners, obviously that's also a bad comparison because they have Trent Williams who could play in any system. But a guy like Morgan Moses, honestly, would be an upgrade for them, and I think he fits that system fairly well. Riley Reif has played in that system quite a bit. Even him would be an upgrade to what they've had. But mostly the tackle position is pretty weak, honestly, in free agency. They can maybe go after somebody with upside. Jermaine Ifedi has been a pretty good run blocker in the past, so if they wanted to focus more so on run blocking, they could go that way. Dennis Kelly is the same. A little bit older, veteran, but can run block. Cam Robinson's still young, but hasn't really played well. Eric Fisher, they could maybe get on a 1-year contract that could upgrade. But I feel like they're going to, it's hard. I think they should look towards free agency. They should try to target one of the big names. And I specifically think Teron Armstead is the guy because I don't think Orlando Brown or Dwayne Brown or Trent Brown necessarily fit this team or this scheme very well. So I feel like if they miss out on Teron Armstead, they're going to go towards the draft at the tackle position. But I do think that the guard position, which is also a position of need, because all of the free agency positions of need are there. So you've got guard, But Brandon Scherf is a fit. Laken Tomlinson is obviously a fit. He played for the 49ers. Connor Williams, I also think, is a fit. James Daniels is a fit. Austin Corbett is a fit. All of these players, I think, at the top of the free agency rankings for the guard position are all fits for Miami. So where they could really spend money here is potentially on guard, because they've spent a lot of capital in first and second round tackles. And there's really only one tackle that I think ideally fits their system at the top with the big price tag. So maybe they go with a veteran like a Riley Reif, a little bit lower scale. But they could look to upgrade left guard and maybe go with Tomlinson from the 49ers, maybe go with Connor Williams or James Daniels or Austin Corbett there at left guard. And I would be probably trying to go for Armstead. I'd go in there as hard as I could. If I couldn't get him, I'd shift my focus towards one of the elite guards. But I probably am not looking to spend a lot of money on both positions. And then you also have center, which is also a position of need for them. So all of really the offensive line is going to have a makeover. For the Dolphins, you've got Ryan Jensen, who could fit any system, but I do think he's more of a power blocker than a zone blocker. Ben Jones is a veteran, would be a nice fit in this system, but he's a little bit older. Brian Allen, I think, would be nice. I think somebody that might be a little bit low-key, but not bad, is Austin Blythe. Maybe Matt Paredes, but I think it's tough. There's not a ton of centers there. I think maybe you could see what Brian Allen's going for. And that might be the guy that you target there at the center position for the Dolphins. But really, their whole offensive line needs work. Wide receiver position, you've got Jalen Waddle, who's a certified stud and probably going to be your Deebo Samuel of this team. Not exactly the same, but utilize similar. Devontae Parker will be the Brandon Ayuk for now. And then you've got to look probably to a third receiver. But as you guys have seen with the Niners, they're more so of a heavy personnel team. At least the way they're currently constructed with Kyle Shanahan. So maybe the Dolphins bring in a fullback. That's something that people don't really think about, but bringing in a fullback that can block and maybe do a little bit of pass catching might be a low-key need for the Dolphins that not a lot of people are thinking about. Their running back position could certainly use a lot more speed. Currently on the roster, Myles Gaskin, Ahmed, Duke Johnson. These guys are slow. They are not burst fast guys. And Miami, and with running Mike McDaniel's offense, they're going to need speed at the running back position. So they could look into Cordarrelle Patterson as that hybrid playmaker, but he might be a little bit pricey for me personally. And I think he wants to stay in Atlanta. But when you look at the other players, you're probably laying off a Leonard Fournette. He's not that type of fit. James Conner's not that type of fit. Melvin Gordon, not that type of fit. But you get towards guys like maybe Rashad Penny, maybe Raheem Mostert, obviously. So there's some speed at this position that you could maybe look towards down the road, but running back in the draft is also never a bad way to go as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if they spent a little bit of money on the running back position because they've got a lot of money. So spending, for a Raheem Mostert for 1 year, maybe, and then going to the draft and getting another guy also that fits the system. The Niners have not been shy of acquiring running backs in the past, so I would expect McDaniel does the same thing. Defensively, obviously Tua will be the starting quarterback next year. Tight end Mike Goseki, I forgot about, but I don't see him coming back. And the reason I don't see him coming back, I don't necessarily think he's a great fit for this offense. Because he's not a blocker, I don't really see him fitting what they like to do. So I think if they're going to get a tight end, it's going to be somebody more with like a balanced skill set, let's say, of like a little bit of blocking presence, but also receiving element. So they could be in on a Dalton Schultz. They could be in on, who else? Who's somebody like, I don't think it's going to be anybody major. Let's see if I can remove that. Robert Tonyan would be interesting because he played with Matt LaFleur. So that's maybe one to look out for. OJ Howard, possibly. David Njoku as well, maybe. If they want to still spend some money at tight end. But tight end's typically an important position for them. But a lot of that has to do with George Kittle because he's just so good. So then you look at the defensive side of the football, and I don't think they're going to shift too far from what Brian Flores was doing. Their personnel is already kind of fit for that. The thing that sucks is they don't have Brian Flores anymore. So their defense is probably going to stay relatively similar, but shift maybe a little bit just in terms of maybe less blitzing. But you look at the linebacker level, I think you could probably just let go of the guys that are free agents, Duke Riley, Elandon Roberts, Brennan Scarlett. Not bad players necessarily, but not must-haves. All of them are going to be cheap if you want them back. Jerome Baker's developed into a good player, and I think, again, you could add a veteran to that position if you like. I don't think it's a massive need. Defensive line, I think, is pretty good with Davis and Wilkins in the middle, and then Butler as kind of your third down pass rusher as well. So that's solid. I don't see them adding anything massive to that position, but certainly edge rusher could be interesting because Emmanuel Ogbah is a very good player, and he's been arguably the best defensive player on their team the last 2 years. Arguably. I don't know if he is, but arguably. So if he leaves, that would be a massive loss. Obviously, they drafted Jalen Phillips, who I like. If they did shift to more of a 4-3 style, like let's say like a traditional more so of what the Niners run a little bit more, then I think he'd thrive in either system. So I think you're fine there. But Emmanuel Ogbah, I think they'd like to have back, but I do think he's going to get a lot of money on the open market. So Miami's going to have to dish out some dough. So maybe they look towards the draft to address that. I don't think this is a huge, I guess it is a decent pass rush draft, but I've heard that there's some uncertainty. I haven't necessarily studied it all, but there are some good pass rushers in free agency. There's guys like Chandler Jones, who you could be in on, who kind of fits every system. Same could be said about Von Miller if you're looking for a short-term solution. But guys similar to Ogbah, I'd look at maybe Hassan Reddick, Harold Landry, both kind of fit the same vein of this defense. JPP is a vet that could fit it as well. Lorenzo Carter is a sneaky name to look out for. Those guys all kind of fit that sort of style of defense, that if you lose Emmanuel Ogbah, that might be alternative targets for you to look at. I think the partnership of Ogbah and Phillips would actually be very nice if you could retain that. Safety position, Holland is a stud and very young. Brandon Jones is decent. Eric Rowe is decent. They could maybe add some depth to that, but I don't think they're going to add massive, huge additions. Their corner positions are all pretty much locked down, it feels like here. Justin Coleman is a free agent, so maybe you look to re-sign him, but he played pretty well last year. So nickel corner could be something that they look towards. Maybe you bring back Justin Coleman and you add somebody younger to the mix. But of course, the man coverage is probably going to still be in their system a lot. So somebody maybe like Desmond King is also out there. I don't think necessarily DJ Reed or anybody like that really fits their system. Maybe Bryce Callahan. Chris Harris is getting a little bit older. I don't really see that. So I think Justin Coleman's probably the best answer if you want to retain him. But really, for the Dolphins, it's all about the offensive line. It would be nice to add another receiver. But offensive line, trying to bring in some speed at running back to get that run game going for the Dolphins and the Mike McDaniel style. And then kind of thriving off of that, you probably let Mike Goseki walk. And then you add, hopefully you get Emmanuel Ogbah back. The defense is pretty well set. I can't really complain about it. It's really just depth that they've got to add to. But pretty much, guys, I mean, all the money and most of the assets are going to go towards the offensive side of the football with a huge shift towards a new philosophy. So you're going to see a lot of different running backs, a lot of new tight ends, a lot of new receivers, a whole new offensive line. And then defensively, they're just going to look to add depth. I think that's really what the case is going to be for the Dolphins. I don't think it's overly complicated here. And if it was me, I would be looking in this first season to really, really, really try to establish the Mike McDaniel offense and try to get that offensive line cooking. So that would be my approach towards the Dolphins. Then we've got the New York Jets to finish off the AFC East. And I realize I'm going long, but this is kind of what it's for. just to talk these out because I find it interesting. If you guys don't, that's fine. But we got the New York Jets. So we got the New York Jets, and the Jets are a team, now alternatively, that probably need a lot. So this is one where I feel like you could really tell me a bunch of different things, and I would agree. Now, something that I will say about the Jets is I do think their offensive line is pretty underrated, at least in currently how it is now. You know, you look at last offseason, they were really bad last offseason, like terrible. Like, you had to reshape the whole offensive line. Really now, I mean, you get your left tackle back, Becton. You let that left tackle come back in Mekhi Becton. And then you've got Becton. You've got Elijah Vera Tucker at left guard. You've got Connor McGovern at center. It's pretty solid. Greg Van Roten at right guard, who's not bad. And then Morgan Moses is the only free agent. So across the offensive line, you're really good on the left side, and you're young on the left side. And then the right side probably needs some retooling. So maybe you bring back Morgan Moses. I do think he's going to have a market because he's a good player. So that might be tough to do. But you look at the right tackle position, so let's just check tackle real quick. You could probably replace him, though. So they run more of that zone scheme, running game. So I brought up kind of those guys already. But Eric Fisher, I don't think they'll be in play for a Teron Armstead personally. They could look towards Riley Reif, Jermaine Ifedi, Bobby Massey, Cornelius Lucas, Dennis Kelly, Tom Compton. Any of these guys would fit, in my opinion, what is it Mike LaFleur is doing offensively. And again, talking about what we talked about with the Dolphins, this is the Kyle Shanahan scheme. So you're looking for those more mobile movers on the offensive line and not the big galoots like the Trent Browns of the world. But Morgan Moses would be nice to have back. I think you can afford him. You've got lots of money. So if he wants to come back, cool. But if not, you've got alternative options. I do think running back could use a little bit of a boost, but obviously that's not a huge need for any team, in my opinion. Michael Carter's probably going to be your starter. I don't think that's bad. Ty Johnson's not terrible, but you can maybe draft one later in the draft for some upside. Wide receiver position is definitely a need. You've got Elijah Moore, who's coming into his second year, I think can be a good player. Berrios is a free agent. Crowder is a free agent. Keelan Cole is a free agent. So you got 3 free agents there. And you got Corey Davis coming back. So you've got your number 1 and your number 2, basically, right? Davis and Moore. Hopefully Moore becomes a number 1 because Davis is more of a good number 2. You've got to look for a slot receiver. So maybe that's Jamison Crowder or maybe that's Braxton Berrios. But you've got to pick one of them if you want one of them back. You could go towards the draft and look for Zach Wilson in the first round. That could be maybe something that they do. But you look towards wide receiver here in free agency, and they've got money to spend. So it's going to be interesting, though, if they can pull any of these bigger names. I'm not necessarily sure they'll be able to. No, Zach Wilson's their quarterback. They don't need a quarterback. Maybe Russell Gage, somebody like that. Cedric Wilson's a low-key name that has played slot before. So those are kind of the names. Rashard Higgins, I don't know. But yeah, another wide receiver, obviously. Probably going to be rather Crowder or Berrios or Cole, like one of those guys that was already on the team. Because I actually felt like when your receiving core was healthy, it was kind of underrated. And Denzel Mims is still on the team, but he hasn't really developed. So that's the offense. Mostly wide receiver and retaining Morgan Moses. Maybe add a running back late. Tight end could use a player for sure. I'm not sure if they're going to be in on tight end. Dalton Schultz could be a nice addition there. Like I said, for Miami, they're not necessarily looking for the pure receiving type. So you guys signing Goseki to me would be surprising. Or somebody like Zach Ertz or Evan Ingram is probably going to be surprising to me. But, somebody like Schultz, Njoku, even like Max Williams or Robert Tonyan. Robert Tonyan would actually be a great fit because he played obviously with Matt LaFleur. So that's another guy that, again, for the Dolphins, I think he's actually an underrated name in this free agency. That would be a good add. There's always good old reliable Jared Cook if you want to go there as well. Defensively, you've got a very good interior defensive line, and I don't think that needs work at all. So you've got Quinnen Williams and John Franklin Myers, who plays on the edge and in the inside. You've also got Sheldon Rankins, who's a good run stuffer. Kyle Phillips isn't bad. So there's some players there. And then you do have a couple guys that are free agents, though. Shepard and the guy that I don't know how to say his name, but he's a beast. Fadukazi, let's go with. I don't know, but he's a good run defender. Those guys, I probably just let them walk. I mean, unless you can just, you don't really need to like sign them. If you want to, you can. It's kind of like I wouldn't really necessarily be desperate. I do think they could use linebackers. So this is a defense. Robert Saleh likes linebackers, likes linebacker coverage. Gerard Davis never got a chance last year. CJ Mosley's still a good player, by the way, from what I saw last year. So CJ Mosley will be back. So that's one of the pieces. He's middle linebacker. So you're looking for weak side linebackers, strong side linebacker. So off-ball linebackers. Somebody like, let's go with, KJ Wright knows the defense. You could bring him in. Anthony Walker's an underrated player. He played well last year. You could go all out for like Ultra's boy there from the Atlanta Falcons, Luakon, if that's how you say his name. Devondre Campbell's probably going to be pricey, but I don't think. Okay, here's the thing. Campbell, to me, fits the Green Bay defense better than he fits this system, even though he's played it before in Atlanta for a lot of years. He obviously played better in Green Bay. So I'd be looking for more speed at that position and maybe guys that have played it before that you could add as depth like KJ Wright. There's not a ton of speed at linebacker in free agency. They might have to look towards the draft, and that might be where their second-round pick or something comes in. But somebody like Anthony Walker wouldn't be a bad pick up. The cornerback position is arguably their biggest need. I don't even know if it's arguable. Other than Bryce Hall, I don't see a ton here. So they're really going to look towards cornerbacks in free agency. If they could land a J.C. Jackson, that would be great. But typically they don't put a ton of stock into the cornerback position. This is a younger, rebuilding team, so I'd be surprised if they tried to sign somebody like Casey Hayward, even though he's a great scheme fit for them. I could see Darius Williams being a target for them. I could see Carlton Davis being a target for them. DJ Reed being a target for them. Who else? Joe Hayden can still play. I don't think he'd go there. Who else? Maybe Desmond King, maybe Xavier Rhodes. But those guys, Rhodes is a little bit older. So you're trying to still find the younger guys, but guys that kind of have that familiarity with that system and have succeeded in that system. But that corner is going to need a lot of work. Safety position, Ashton Davis isn't bad. I don't think Marcus May is going to be back, but lucky for you guys, safety's pretty stacked in free agency this year. You've got a lot of players. Somebody like Malik Hooker could be he played for the Colts and then the Cowboys. He could be a low-key signing that I think fits free safety-wise. If you're trying to spend less, Justin Reed, they could go obviously in the draft, like you said. Quandre Diggs is somebody that's great in this system. Marcus Williams, you could spend the money to get him. He's still young. Jordan Whitehead would be a great strong safety in this system. So is somebody like Jabril Peppers, Jaquiski Tart. So I do definitely think Tracy Walker too. So there's a lot of safeties that they could target. So I think they're going to try to bring in a veteran safety and then maybe draft Kyle Hamilton in the draft. That could certainly happen as well. But the Jets have a lot of money and they've got some flexibility and they've got a lot of needs. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But definitely look for Robert Saleh to put a stamp on his defense, specifically at the second and the third level. I don't think edge is a big need considering Carl Lawson will be back, so they're just going to add probably depth. Their D-line is good already, so it's really kind of shoring up that back end and shoring up the offensive line. And then from there, you're adding the flavor of the wide receiver positions and stuff like that to the New York Jets. So the Jets actually aren't as bad of a team or roster or in as bad of a position that I think a lot of people think. So that's the AFC East, guys. Let's move on to the AFC North. I have not talked about Denver. I've only done the AFC East so far. Like you said, I'm taking my time here. But we got the Cleveland Browns. So the Cleveland Browns are up next. Let me know, by the way, if you guys have any questions. I'll definitely answer. So, the offensive side of the football. This one is actually going to be pretty quick and simple. The Cleveland Browns don't have any needs other than wide receiver on offense. Period. That's it. I don't have to say anything else. Because I don't think they're moving on from Baker Mayfield. The only way they would do that is through a trade. And I don't see that coming. At least yet. So wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. Jarvis Landry's going to be gone, in my opinion. Rashard Higgins could be back. I think Donovan Peoples-Jones will be in the mix. But other than that, they need another receiver. So I wouldn't be surprised if they targeted Chris Godwin, if they targeted Allen Robinson, if they targeted one of these top names at wide receiver. Obviously, outside of Odell Beckham Jr., that is not happening. So, the wide receiver position. Offensive line, straight across the board, is all back. David Njoku is a free agent. But I don't think you should really be spending big money on him because you still have Austin Hooper and Harrison Bryant. So bringing him back would be a luxury and not a need. So the way that I look at Cleveland is spend the money that you would have spent on Njoku on a wide receiver. And I think Chris Godwin would be a great fit for them. I also feel like, who else? Somebody like in the inside that's tough. But Robinson's not a bad fit for really any team. But I think specifically Chris Godwin, kind of to just upgrade that Jarvis Landry role, would probably be the way that I go. You could also look to the draft, obviously. Mike Williams, I don't think fits necessarily that well here. AB's not going to work here. Juju would actually not be a bad value signing to take over for Jarvis Landry. If you want to add some speed, maybe DJ Chark or Will Fuller, they could look that way. Or if they want to go veteran, T.Y. Hilton, or who else? Emmanuel Sanders as a third, Jamison Crowder. Because the Browns are in a funky place, right? They were a much better roster than their record indicated. So they're not that far away. They just need to add a wide receiver in free agency, maybe in the draft as well, and then upgrade the defense. Now we move to the defense. Myles Garrett's there, obviously. Malik McDowell was huge for them last year, and he's back. At least he's currently signed, I believe. They've got okay depth. I think they could really upgrade the interior defensive line depth. Specifically get maybe a big body in there to take on the run game. I do feel like last year they got moved around a little bit in the run game on the D-line and the inside. But the edge, I think you're looking to bring back Jadeveon Clowney for sure to pair with Myles Garrett. And then behind Jadeveon Clowney, you always got to be aware that he has injury concerns. So bringing in more depth behind that. And there's lots of players that can fit this system. One that I'm thinking of off the top of my head is Jerry Hughes from the Bills. I think would be a nice add as a depth player. They could look at somebody like Derek Barnett, Justin Houston, Nwosu from the Chargers. Maybe, I don't think McKinley would come back. I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns, it would be a classic Brown signing if they signed like Dante Fowler to a 1-year contract. That would be like this year's Tack McKinley, so to speak. And then on the interior defensive line, they could use a difference maker there. They don't really have one. I mean, McDowell was solid. They could use a difference maker, like a Calais Campbell, but there's not a lot of guys out there. DJ Jones, I think, fits this system well. They could look, if they want a bigger body, Sebastian Joseph Day, or Harrison Phillips as a run defender, but they kind of like those pass rusher types. So guys like Maurice Hurst, like I said already, DJ Jones, maybe BJ Hill. Those guys would make sense for the Browns. Linebacker, I would re-sign Anthony Walker, in my opinion, if you could, for a cheap, 1 to 2 year contract, because I thought he was solid. You've got JOK at that position, who is really good. And you've got some other younger guys like Jacob Phillips, Wilson. Those guys are kind of like depth players. Corner position, you addressed last offseason, so you don't really have to address it this offseason, but you might address safety. So this is a team that could use, I think, speed at safety. I think their safety speed is lacking, but they're kind of that team that's a little bit, Seattle scheme based. So they do kind of traditionally like that free safety and strong safety because they play a lot of cover 3. So their strong safety has to be involved in the run game more so. But I do think they could upgrade speed because I don't think Johnson is a very fast player. But I could see them trying to target like Whitehead, Curse, Kareem Jackson. I could see them targeting, who else? Jabril Peppers. They traded away Jaquiski Tart, Tracy Walker. Again, the same guys sort of the Jets, same mold, just to complement Johnson. Or they could try to add a free safety and make Johnson kind of more of the strong in-box safety. In that case, you might try to steal Jesse Bates away, but that would probably be pretty pricey. Marcus Williams would definitely be a fit there. Marcus May would be a fit. Quandre Diggs would be a fit. I don't think Devin McCourty would come, but you could try. Anthony Harris, actually, I think makes a lot of sense for this defense. I wouldn't be surprised if they signed him. So safety, I would definitely look towards, maybe making Johnson more of that in-box player and maybe try to sign a faster guy for the back end. Might not be a bad idea if you're the Browns, but really, you're looking mostly to spend on the defense, and then offensively, just adding wide receiver would be nice for Cleveland. The Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals. Jake with the super chat, or the super sticker, I should say. Thank you once again. Jake, you're the man. Appreciate it for the super sticker. The Cincinnati Bengals. So we got the Cincinnati Bengals up next. The team that went to the Super Bowl. One thing that you don't need is quarterback. Another thing you don't need is wide receiver. So you're good there. What do you need? You need offensive line. That's what you need, Bengals fans, and you know it. Jonah Williams is there. He's solid, but everybody else could probably use an improvement from guard to center to the opposite tackle position. I don't think having Riley Reif back would actually be all that bad. I thought when, if they could have had him in there at the end of the season, I think it would have improved the tackle immensely just to solidify it a little bit more. And then really, if you could get Riley Reif back as that transition guy, maybe you draft the younger tackle in the middle rounds to take over for him a year from now or 2 years from now. But I think you could bring back Riley Reif, have Jonah Williams on the left side, Riley Reif on the right side, and then spend your money in the middle of the offensive line. I think that would immensely help Joe Burrow, because I think Joe Burrow is one of those guys, kind of like Tom Brady, where he likes to step up and maneuver the pocket. He doesn't necessarily like to get outside the pocket. So really, it's important for those type of players to have solid interior pass protection. So when you look at the Bengals, the guard position, the center position is where you target. So guard, you've got Brandon Scherf, Lincoln Tomlinson, Connor Williams, James Daniels, Austin Corbett, Andrew Norwell, Alex Kappa, Mark Glowinski, Ted Karras. All of these guys could be on their way to Cincinnati, and I wouldn't be surprised. Brandon Scherf would be the ultimate scheme fit to me. Tomlinson, same thing, would work really well. I think James Daniels would also be nice. Any of those guys, if they could get one of those guys, that would be a huge home run. I think Andrew Norwell might be a little bit less pricey. That would be a nice addition. They run more so zone scheme stuff in the run game, so more so the zone blocking guys are the way to go, but they're not as zone reliant as teams like, let's say, the Rams. So center, you've got Ben Jones or Ryan Jensen. This is a team that could afford to go a little bit older with some of their acquisitions because they're in that window for the Super Bowl. So getting a Ryan Jensen or a Ben Jones would be awesome. I also feel like even a Matt Paredes or a Brian Allen wouldn't be bad either. And I'd specifically look at the guys that have played for the Rams. So Brian Allen, Austin Blythe, and who else? Who's the guard? Austin Corbett. All of those guys make sense for the Bengals because of how similar Zach Taylor and Sean McVay are and how much they kind of feed off of each other. And, you know, when we watched the Super Bowl, it was almost like the same team was playing each other. So you could see the Bengals stealing from the Rams and former Ram players to help their offensive line, especially if it would help the continuity of the offensive line. That would be a massive plus. The defense. So the offense, it's really offensive line, guys. CJ Uzomah is the tight end. He should be back unless they get Gronk. Other than that, I think they're just going to keep CJ Uzomah. As I've said for basically every team that needs a tight end, I wouldn't be surprised at all if another team, you know, Zach Taylor, went out and targeted a Robert Tonyan or somebody like that. I brought up Robert Tonyan a ton, but I feel like that would make sense. But I also look at the Bengals, and I feel like they're a team that does use their tight end more so as a receiver. So I wouldn't be shocked if they targeted Zach Ertz or Evan Ingram even, if CJ Uzomah goes elsewhere just for some reason. I don't know, but I thought he was a nice tight end for them. I think they'd like to keep him. But this is a team that doesn't necessarily need their tight end to be a big-time blocker. So I feel like somebody like Zach Ertz or, who did I bring up? Evan Ingram wouldn't also be shocking if they signed those guys. And then defensively, DJ Reader is still there. Trey Hendrickson is signed. Sam Hubbard is signed. So you got 3 of the 4 starting guys. Ogunjobi is a free agent. BJ Hill is a free agent. So you've got to sign one of those guys. If it was up to me, I'd try to re-sign BJ Hill tomorrow. And then I'd look to add layers of depth behind that, specifically at edge. I would like for them to have more flexibility at the edge position to rotate Hubbard and rotate Hendrickson if they could. That would be my personal preference. So adding like a veteran, like let's just throw out Justin Houston, like somebody like that, Jason Pierre-Paul, like the older guy, but can still play maybe better in a rotation nowadays than he is a starter. But add that type of presence to the Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson combination, and you're working with something there. And maybe with the amount of hybrid stuff that you do up front, somebody like JPP might not be a bad addition to this defense. Bengals do have a decent amount of money too, so they might be able to dish out some money for potentially somebody pretty interesting. But you've already re-signed, if you re-signed Sam Hubbard to a decent contract, you have Hendrickson on decent money, you have Reed on decent money. So it's more so about adding depth up front than anything else, and probably re-signing BJ Hill. I would honestly just let Ogunjobi walk. The linebacker position could add somebody. Logan Wilson was absolutely unbelievable this year. I think you've got one of your starters. I think it would be nice to add a second linebacker there. Somebody just solid that could contribute. Just a low-end free agent. Secondary, Von Bell. Obviously, your number one priority is getting Jesse Bates back. I think they will. You've got Awuzie, Mike Hilton. I believe Trey Waynes, who was hurt last year, is back as well, but they maybe could move on from him in free agency. So Von Bell and Jesse Bates, obviously getting Jesse Bates back is huge priority. I thought Ricardo Allen was actually decent for them as a third safety, so maybe you'd like to re-sign him as well. But Mike Hilton's your nickel. Awuzie is one of your corners. It's about that other side that you're looking for. So corners in free agency and they have enough money to really target whoever they kind of want to target, to be honest with you. So they could go out there, and I was very, very, very pleasantly surprised by their secondary play last year. But I think getting somebody that could play man and zone, equally well would be very nice. Bengals should really consider somebody like Stephon Gilmore. JC Jackson might be a little bit too much money at this point. If they could get Carlton Davis, I mean, that would be amazing. Stephon Gilmore would be amazing. Even like, Ward, I'd probably stay away from the Patrick Petersons. I don't think Joe Hayden really does well enough in man. He's more so his own guy. Maybe you take a flyer on Jason Verrett. Who else? But yeah, I think they should really try to target like a Gilmore or a Davis. I would be trying to go all in for those type of guys, because if you get that one more like number one corner type, that would be a game changer. That would definitely be a game changer for this defense. If you had that secondary with Awuzie on one side, Hilton in the nickel, let's say Gilmore on the other side, and then you got Bates and Bell, I mean, that would be pretty cool. So I would look to get a big-time corner if I could this free agency. Add to the depth of the D-line and the offensive line. And I think they have enough money to do that. Honestly, they do. So the Bengals are obviously a contender, but I think a lot of their relevance next year is going to hinge on understanding one very important thing. So a lot of times teams that go to the Super Bowl or go far in the playoffs just feel like they've got to re-sign everybody and run it back. Usually when you run it back, you get worse, because things don't replicate year to year in the NFL. Players regress, players get hurt, things happen, other teams get better. So for the Bengals, the number one thing they've got to understand is don't count on bringing everyone back for it to just replicate. You've got to get better. You've got to feel like at the end of the day, in training camp, your roster is better than it was last year. That is the number one thing I would say to the Bengals. All right. The Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay. The Pittsburgh Steelers are at a crossroads now, because the Pittsburgh Steelers no longer have Ben Roethlisberger. So one of their priority needs this offseason is going to be the quarterback position. Who will be their quarterback next year? I don't know, guys. I have no idea. Could it be a free agent? Could it be a rookie? It could. It could be either one, and I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever. Now, looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers and their needs, obviously quarterback, as I mentioned. Wide receiver is pretty good. It would be nice to have the trio of Juju, Claypool, and Deontay Johnson, but honestly, just having Claypool and Deontay Johnson is good enough for me. James Washington's also a free agent, as well as Ray McLeod. Not a big deal. I feel like with how good the Steelers are at drafting wide receivers, they're going to draft one. I don't know when, but they'll draft one this year, probably in the 3rd or 4th round. Now, looking at the offensive line, this is the real big area of need outside of quarterback. They need a tackle. They need guards. They need centers. They need all of it. They really, when you look at their starting offensive line, they have almost zero answers. Honestly, the best player from last year might have been a guy that's a free agent. So you look at Okafor, I believe is how you pronounce his name. He was pretty good for them last year, but he is a free agent. So trying to retain him would be, I think, huge. Trey Turner, you could let him go if you want. I mean, you could bring him back. That was a weird sound, but you get the point. Looking at the offensive line, the Steelers could use a lot of talent. So you could definitely go young. Guard position. James Daniels is young, good player. I don't think they're going to be in the mix for Brandon Scherf, Lincoln Tomlinson, because they're a little bit older, probably a little bit pricey for them. I think Alex Kappa is somebody that would fit the Steelers. He feels like a Steeler. He plays with a hard-nosed, physical style, power guard from the Bucks. That would be an undervalued player to target. Mark Glowinski, same sort of thing. Ted Karras, same sort of thing. These guys make sense to me for the Steelers. You want to bring that physicality element. I feel like they're missing just the ability to move people up front especially in the run game, that I think would be huge. So guys like, if you could get even Alex Kappa and Ted Karras, that would be unbelievable. And that would be a huge upgrade. You could also go young, like I said. Center position, I'm not sure if they'll be in on Ryan Jensen, but he's obviously the top guy. Ben Jones would also fit for me. Bradley Bozeman would fit. Maybe Ethan Pocic. I don't really see Brian Allen being a great fit for them. I think he's more of a fit for the teams like the Dolphins and stuff like that. So center, I think, is going to go from the draft, but I think guard could definitely be handled in free agency. And tackle also could be handled in free agency potentially. Do the Steelers try to get in on a bigger name tackle this offseason? Now, given their salary cap space, I'm not sure if they can, but maybe. We'll see. So offensive line is their top priority outside of, obviously, quarterback. And then you look at the defense. Their defensive line is probably still fine for now. You know, it's getting a little bit older, but Cameron Hayward is playing at the peak of his powers, and Chris Wormley's okay, and you've still got Tuitt, I believe, is still there. He's been hurt a lot, but I believe he's still under contract. So those guys are all fine for you. Edge position, obviously, you've got TJ Watt, the ultimate difference maker. Alex Highsmith, I like. I think those are your two starters going into next year, and you're just adding depth from there. Linebacker, I know that a lot of Steeler fans are complaining about Devin Bush's play, but you've already spent a lot of capital in Devin Bush and Joe Schobert. So spending a lot of money on linebacker, I think, would be nonsensical. I don't think it makes sense. So the front seven, I think, is honestly fairly solid. I think what's important for them is adding a little bit of depth behind TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, because we've seen such a massive dip when TJ Watt leaves the lineup that I think getting in just a steady, like, outside linebacker that can set the edge and stop the run. Maybe you bring in like a Dante Hightower from the Patriots or a Jawan Bentley. These are inside linebackers, but they could play a little bit of outside, but guys that are good against the run and can go downhill and fit that Steelers scheme would make some sense to me, because Devin Bush certainly needs to be hid in the run game because he's been really bad. In the secondary, I think they should do their best to re-sign Ahkello Witherspoon. They could re-sign Terrell Edmunds if they like, but I don't think they need to. Obviously, they've got Minkah Fitzpatrick, who's good. Sutton, I think, solid. Norwood was pleasant surprise, I guess you could say. Justin Lane, like, these guys aren't really well known, but they're not terrible. Joe Hayden could be back. They could target like a Stephon Gilmore, who I think would be a great fit for them, especially at this stage in his career. They could target a Carlton Davis, these type of corners that are very smart and good in zone, but also can play man. They could look maybe for the veterans as well. A Levi Wallace type feels like a Steeler signing to me over the years, but I'd try to bring back Ahkello Witherspoon if you could, and that would shore up one of the sides of your corner position. Then maybe try to upgrade the other side, but I think some depth on defense, and I think the number one priority for the Steelers this offseason should be the offensive line. Look for the quarterback later on. Maybe they go after Jameis Winston. I think that would be a nice fit for them. I'm not buying Jimmy Garoppolo to the Steelers. I don't think that makes sense, just given their scheme. I don't know. I don't know about that one. But Winston and maybe Wentz. If you want a short-term solution, bring on my guy Gardner Minshew, bro. I'm telling you, the bargain quarterback of 2022. If I was the GM, I would trade for him. But yeah, I think they're probably going to draft a quarterback. So I think the number one priority for their team is to redo the offensive line with the money that they have, and then draft a young quarterback, get that new offensive line with that receiving core. You've got Harris to rely on. Also, bringing in a backup running back wouldn't be a bad idea either. That can complement Najee Harris and take a little bit of a load off of him, because he is simply on the field way too much. So that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Offensive line, young quarterback. If you want to go for a vet, I would go for like a guy like Winston. They'll probably draft a receiver because why not? They're so good at it. Secondary, bring back Witherspoon. Maybe look to get a Gilmore type. Up front, I think you're fine. You just got to add depth. Jake says, Mitch is taking this so seriously. It's like he's speaking to the GMs and the teams. I love it. That's the whole point, bro. That's the whole point, but I appreciate it. Thank you for watching, and thank you for loving it. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. All right. The Baltimore Ravens. We got to talk about the Ravens, who I feel like are a serious underrated team entering next season, because I think a lot of people just generally underrate Lamar Jackson. And then on top of that, they've got potentially a good team next year. They've got a strong coaching staff. They've got a lot of players returning from injury. So all of those things have to be considered if you're the Baltimore Ravens. But looking at the Baltimore Ravens, I think you finally have a receiving core that is respectable, starting with Rashad Bateman and Marquise Brown, and then obviously Mark Andrews at tight end. You don't have to do much there. Maybe you bring in Antonio Brown, or you bring in somebody like a veteran that can be a number 3, maybe an upgrade over Sammy Watkins, who I didn't think played very well. My personal target for you would be Jamison Crowder. I think somebody in the slot that's reliable, that can get open. I still think Jamison Crowder can play. And mostly Bateman and Brown are on the outside, on the perimeter. So putting Crowder in the slot would be that type of target. I don't think you've got to spend major money at this position either. So yeah, somebody like Crowder. Low end, veteran, can play, reliable, and wants to play on a good team. That makes sense. The offensive line, Ronnie Stanley, stud, back. That's huge. Tyree Phillips is good. He's back. Then you've got Kevin Zeitler. He's very good, and I thought rejuvenated himself. He is back as well. Villanueva's under contract. I think he's going to be cut. I think he's under contract. I think he's going to be cut. I think they're going to get rid of him. He was terrible for them last year. People told me he was terrible, and, they were right, so I'll give them credit for that. Center position, you want Bradley Bozeman back. If you don't, you're wrong. But you want Bradley Bozeman back. If you can't get him, maybe you look towards Ryan Jensen, who I believe played for the Ravens at one point. Or you look at Ben Jones, or maybe you look at Ted Karras, who's played guard and center. But all of those guys are kind of like power run players. Then you look at right tackle. Honestly, they might want to spend some money on right tackle. Like Trent Brown. I mean, Trent Brown, I know Orlando Brown's not going to be the pick, but Trent Brown would be a certified stud on the Baltimore Ravens. Like that guy on the right side, with Stanley on the left side, opening up the run game for Lamar Jackson and J.K. Dobbins, like look out. So Orlando Brown would be great with them. Ryan Jensen would also be great. So right tackle, I think they might spend some big money on, or they could look maybe to the draft, but either way, they've got to upgrade the right tackle's position. That's probably their biggest need on offense. Everything else is good. Patrick Ricard, the fullback, they'll probably bring back as well, but that's not going to break the bank. Defensively, also their running backs are back, so they don't need to really look towards running backs because I don't think you're going to lose your top 2 running backs again. And then also you've kind of found out that you've got a couple other guys that can play in need be. But if they lose both running backs, they're going to probably pick up another like Latavius Murray type next year if that happens. Defensively, this is where a lot of players could leave. Brandon Williams, Calais Campbell, older interior defensive lineman. Justin Houston is a free agent. LJ Fort at linebacker. Justin Ellis, Pernell McPhee. The Ravens do a very good job at signing veterans in the front 7 to 1-year contracts. They've done this for many years, and they usually fit the scheme very well, and every single time they sign somebody, I'm like, yeah, that totally is the Baltimore Ravens, and it makes sense, and I know the guy's going to be good. Every single year, they sign Pernell McPhee, and every single year he plays well for them. So that's kind of the way it goes. I think they've needed a linebacker upgrade for a while, but I don't think they really value that position. I think somebody like, and this is the thing, I think they're changing their scheme. So I'm not quite sure how much their scheme is going to change from Don Martindale, but maybe they go a little bit more 4-man rush speed up front. So that would completely change what they do. And that would completely change the context for what type of players you're getting. But you've got Away, who's a first-round pick and pretty good. You've got, I think, Tyus Bowser is one of the most underrated edge players in the NFL. You got those two guys on the edge. Jalen Ferguson's okay. He's still there. So you've got a decent edge rotation. It would be nice to have another stud, but that might just take too much money. And they're not in a great position. I think they'd like to have Calais Campbell back, but maybe with their shift defensively, it might shift the type of personnel that they have in the interior as well. So I can't really answer that necessarily, unless you guys know. But getting Marcus Peters back is going to be huge. I think they want to re-sign Anthony Everett, who is going to go somewhere. If he doesn't get signed here, he's going to get a decent contract because I think he was pretty good for them. Jimmy Smith's also a free agent, and Deshaun Elliott's a free agent. So I think they could look towards a safety. You know, they could use an upgrade there, somebody that can be a difference maker on the back end. Tyrann Mathieu, Marcus May, who else? Marcus May, Tyrann Mathieu. Maybe they go for Devin McCourty. I wouldn't be surprised by that. So it's more so a free safety, right, that they need, like a more of a coverage safety. Maybe like Anthony Harris, I don't know. But somebody that can play, you know, a plethora of coverages. Justin Reed would be a pretty good one, actually. Or maybe they just bring back Elliott, but you could see an upgrade there. But their corner position is going to be immensely better with all their players back and healthy. And they're very good at finding depth at that position throughout the draft, undrafted guys, that sort of thing. They're kind of like New England that way. But I'd like to see them get faster at linebacker. I'd like to see them get a right tackle. I'd like to see them get a third receiver upgrade. Retain Bradley Bozeman. Get a safety. That's a difference maker. And then maybe draft some D-lineman edge players. I don't think you're going to be able to afford some of the guys that are on the open market. You know, when you look at edge and stuff like that, you could look at like Chandler Jones. You could look at Ogba. You could look at Reddick, Landry. I just think they're going to be too much money. Now, maybe a guy like Chandler Jones on like a 1-year contract, something like that, might work, but I'm not exactly 100% sure, especially given that there's going to be, you know, maybe a scheme change there. And do they value that safety position the way that they used to when they had Ed Reed and stuff? Because it's been a number of years, you know, since they lost Earl Thomas, they haven't really spent big money on safety. They've kind of gotten away with spending lesser money on it. So maybe they continue to take that strategy with the safety position and kind of spending less on it. We'll see. So Baltimore's tricky, but I think mostly shoring up that offensive line for Lamar Jackson, adding a complimentary receiver, and making sure that back end of your defense is still one of the strongest in football would be the things that I do. All right, the AFC South. There's just a lot of safeties in free agency, Jake. A lot of good ones. So that's why I'm talking about safety a lot, and also a lot of teams need safeties. But there's a lot of safeties in the NFL, so there's a lot of good safeties in the NFL. I think the safety position is a really strong position in the NFL today. There's not a lot of superstars, but there's a lot of good players. The Indianapolis Colts. The Indianapolis Colts, I've discussed earlier in the offseason that I think they should be one of the teams to go all in to try to get an Aaron Rodgers, because I really feel like they're a quarterback and a wide receiver away from being a true contender for the Super Bowl. But me realizing that this is probably unrealistic has me saying that, okay, that's probably not going to happen. But what I do realize is that Carson Wentz is probably not going to be the guy. So, number one, what's quarterback going to be? Are they going to trade Carson Wentz and bring in a Jimmy Garoppolo or a Jameis Winston or somebody of that nature? Are they going to try to get a Gardner Minshew, my guy? Or are they going to draft somebody? Because I'm not sure they're going to be able to trade for a Kirk Cousins or a Matt Ryan. It does kind of feel like the Colts are going to try to go with another 1-year type of deal, but just somebody different than Carson Wentz. So my thought is they're going to try to go with somebody for 1 year, middle-of-the-road quarterback, but he's more conservative, more of a game manager than Carson Wentz. Offensively, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. Other than Michael Pittman Jr., your wide receiver position stinks. You need a wide receiver too. And I think you could go out and with the money that you have, especially if you don't go out and get a Russell Wilson or an Aaron Rodgers, you could go and get an Allen Robinson for your receiving core. You could go and get a Chris Godwin. You could go and get one of these top receivers in free agency. And I think it's worth it because if you had a Michael Pittman and then let's say an Allen Robinson, that would make a middle-of-the-road quarterback a lot better. And then you've got a run game that's powerful and that a defense has to respect. So 2 receivers with that would be very nice. The offensive line is not as good as it was, right? You've got Quentin Nelson. You've got Ryan Kelly back. You've got Braden Smith. Those 3 players are good. The left tackle and the right guard position, I think they could look to re-sign Mark Lewinsky just to keep that rapport. The left tackle position, maybe they bring back Eric Fisher, but they could also draft somebody at left tackle, and I wouldn't be surprised by that. So tackle or Matt Pryor, they could sign Matt Pryor, and then that would be what I would do. I would sign Matt Pryor, and then I would pick somebody in the draft, and I'd let Eric Fisher go somewhere else. Tight end, I'd like to have Mo Alley Cox back, but it never felt like they were really utilizing him all that much, so he might walk and go somewhere else. I don't think that's a huge loss. You've got your 2-headed monster at running back with Hines and Taylor, obviously. Defensively, a lot of backups that are free agents. Teray, Stallworth, Franklin, Sendejo, Odom, all these guys are backups. But you've probably got to look towards the edge position. A nice pass rusher off the edge would be a huge get for this team. Somebody like Randy Gregory would be a great fit, I think. Maybe somebody, lesser like Nwosu wouldn't be bad. Derek Barnett would be okay. But the Colts typically, they rather go big or they go home. And what I mean by that is they go really cheap or really expensive. They don't really go in between. So somebody at the top of the market, maybe like Randy Gregory, or they could go through the draft or low-key veteran. Maybe like Arden Key would be a good fit. Linebacker's good. I don't think they really need much. Maybe depth. Cornerback could use some work. Kenny Moore is good. Rocky Sin's okay. Isaiah Rodgers is okay. They could use another perimeter corner. Xavier Rhodes was still solid, but I mean, it would be nice for them to have a number 1 corner. They just don't really need number 1 corners. I think it would honestly be better for them if they had a better safety, right? Because they've got Blackman and Willis who are solid. I think that's probably going to be what they stay with, but they kind of use their safeties. Their safeties are almost more important than their corners. But I think Casey Hayward is a great fit for Gus Bradley's system. Carlton Davis would be nice in that system. Obviously, J.C. Jackson's good in every system. You're not looking at the Bryce Callahans or the DJ Reeds because they're nickel corners. Maybe Joe Hayden could be good, honestly, in that system. Levi Wallace has played in that system. Jason Verrett, Kyle Fuller, somebody that I haven't really mentioned, I think would work too. So, yeah, you could look for a corner this free agency. So mostly defensively, pass rusher and corner. That's really it. Everything else is solid. And then depth. And then offensively, big-time receiver, please. Re-sign Matt Pryor. Draft a tackle. Re-sign Mark Glowinski. Bring in Allen Robinson or Chris Godwin. That would be awesome. And that's the way to go for the Colts. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do at quarterback, but it does kind of feel like they might trade for like Jimmy Garoppolo or somebody like that I think would be a solid fit with Frank Reich. I would really like to see them get like Matt Ryan, but I don't think that's going to happen. So that's the Colts. What's up, Bodo? How you doing? He says, go Steelers, draft a quarterback and the offensive line. So you're on draft quarterback. That's what I said as well. I just did the Steelers, by the way, and we are about, I want to say, a little bit past halfway through. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams left. What happened to the camera? Camera fuzzy? I think it's okay. Is it okay now? I think it's fine. Will any team go all in for a quarterback, asks Rob. I don't know. I don't think so. Unless it's Aaron Rodgers. I could see maybe the Broncos. It doesn't really feel like anybody is, though. The rumors have died down, which maybe it means that the team is, but it feels like nobody is, honestly, and that sucks. Gonna be honest with you. The Houston Texans are next, which, just read the graphic, guys. I don't really know what to say about this team, to be honest with you. If I was the GM of this team, I honestly don't think Nick Caserio did a bad job last year when all he did was sign veterans to one-year contracts. Like, when I'm looking at this depth chart right now, there is a incredible amount of red on the screen. It is ridiculous. And red on our lads just indicates they're a free agent. They probably have 30 free agents on this roster that I'm looking at right now. So we start with quarterback. It's going to be Davis Mills, most likely. I don't think they're going to draft anybody this year. They're going to wait till next year. If I was the Texans, this is what I would do. Try to trade Deshaun Watson for everything possible. Trade him for every pick imaginable. Have Davis Mills start. And then try to suck and get the first pick. That's what I would do. I'm not going to lie. Now, offensive line, I don't think is that terrible. I've certainly seen worse. You've got Tunsil and Howard, and Lane Taylor's okay. Justin McCray's below average, not great, but I've seen worse. Okay, so I think they're not in terrible shape. Tight end, Brevin Jordan, Pharaoh Brown. I mean, Jordan Akins is a free agent. These guys are not household names by any means. They could use an upgrade there. I don't think there's really anybody. Like, tight end is not a position. When you're the Texans, you're not looking to get a tight end that's going to change your team. Okay, maybe you look for a receiver, but it's going to be really hard to entice a top receiver in free agency to come to your team. So you're probably going to have to draft one. That might be what they do, honestly. They might look to draft a receiver or a big-time defensive playmaker that they can build their offense or their defense around. They could trade Brandon Cooks, and if it was me, I love Brandon Cooks, but if I was the Texans, I would trade him to a team that needs a receiver. So let's say you could get a second-round pick from the Raiders. I would trade Brandon Cooks for a second-round pick to the Raiders. That's what I would do. Clear that money out, get more money in, get a pick for a younger player they can use on your offensive, defensive line, or, maybe a younger receiver, right? Running back position, I think they could continue to go with the older veteran like the Rex Burkhead, the David Johnsons, the guys that they've had. Pick up those guys again. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. They actually played pretty well. Especially Burkhead was kind of surprising at the end of the year. Nico Collins, I think you've got something in him, so he might be part of the solution there. But yeah, move on from Cooks and bring in new, younger blood. Quarterback, Mills, for now, until you get that first pick. Offensive line, keep as much intact as possible. Keep bringing in those low-key, like one-year contract guys at guard and center, and try to find a diamond in the rough. That's what I would be looking to do. So to give some names here, I'm only get the names that PFF shows me, but so if I was the Texans, I would be trying to sign if Alex Kappa was affordable, somebody like that, somebody like, kind of maybe a little bit undervalued, that's a little bit younger, and maybe he's not quite hit his peak. Who else? There's some tackles maybe. Like you could maybe go for like a Cornelius Lucas type or a Cam Robinson. Somebody like that, like guys with upside that maybe could get better because you're just really bad. Like, let's be honest. And then defensively, you're fuck. Yeah. Defensively, I think Jacob Martin you should re-sign. Malik Collins wasn't terrible. I think they're gonna do the same thing they did last year. Sign all these guys 1-year contracts. Grugier Hill actually played really well for you guys, and he got hurt, which sucked. Same thing could be said about, Hewitt and Kirksey aren't terrible. So defensively, talking about their scheme, their defense is very cover 2 based because they brought in Lovie Smith. So they're going to want to bring in fast linebackers, speed rushers, smaller interior defensive linemen, and probably not as much capital on corner. They're also going to want cover safeties, right? Because they play a lot of cover 2. Tampa 2, right? So think of the Tampa Bay Bucks from 2002. That's kind of what they're trying to mold themselves after, right? So they're going to go cheaper at corner. They might spend a little bit of money at linebacker. Checking free agency. Aluakon would be one target that I would maybe look out for. Alexander Johnson would be another that they could potentially bring in. Safeties are important for them with range. So Marcus Williams, if they want to throw money at him. Justin Reed, bringing him back wouldn't be a bad idea. But yeah, the Texans are really tough, man. I think you've got to try to establish an offensive and defensive line, especially in these systems, and then work everything from there. Get rid of the good assets that you have for picks and to clear up cap, like Brandon Cooks, and then just throw a bunch of 1-year contracts at the lesser positions to try and find some diamonds in the rough. There are a couple players here that will, be part of your future, but there aren't a ton. So that's the concerning part. So this team's got a long way to go, and I think really their rebuild is going to start. It's already started, but it's really going to begin once they trade Deshaun Watson, whenever that is. So that's the Texans. It's hard to talk about a team that literally needs everything. Like, I could talk about every single player on this team and how they could upgrade it. It's just really difficult to do. So, yeah, I feel bad for Texans fans, but I think next year is going to be the year where you could get significantly better. If you get a good high draft pick next year, could do some wonders for this team. All right. The Tennessee Titans are next. The Titans, number 1 seed in the AFC, disappointing exit with the first round loss in the divisional round. The Titans are in not a terrible position cap-wise. Am I correct? No, well, they're negative money, but they could get to positive fairly easily. Now, the thing with the Titans, though, is that they are kind of aging and their window is closing a little bit. So Ryan Tannehill showed some cracks in the armor, so to speak, in the playoffs. He was kind of the reason they lost. So he's their quarterback. That's not changing anytime soon. But he needs to play better in the big moment. Derrick Henry fully healthy is going to be huge for them. But they do have questions on the offensive line. Taylor Lewan is getting older. He's still there. Roger Saffold's getting older. He's still there. So you're not replacing them quite yet. Ben Jones is older. And if I'm the Titans, Ben Jones is a great player. But because you're already so old at left tackle, left guard, you don't want to be old at center, left guard, left tackle with all of these guys on contracts. That to me would be a bad idea. I understand that you're kind of in this window to win, but you've got to be able to balance it. So I think replacing Ben Jones in the draft would be my opinion, my way to go. Right tackle, if you guys could sign a younger right tackle, that would be nice. Trent Brown would be a perfect fit. Orlando Brown would be a perfect fit, but it does feel like both those guys are going to end up on their teams. Looking at tackles, they could be in on Teron Armstead, but I don't think they have enough money. I think they'd love to have him. There's no question about that. Maybe they look a little bit low-key with a guy like Cam Robinson. But they could also look to the draft for right tackle. They've tried to find a solution in the draft for many seasons. They've done a really good job at finding those low-key tackles, though. And they play pretty well for them, at least in the run game. Julio's getting older. They spent capital on him. He's still there. A.J. Brown's a beast. You're really working this offense around A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry. Your tight end position, all of your players are free agents. Ferkser being the headliner there. Obviously, Jonnu Smith left last offseason. So a tight end, I think they're going to bring back Ferkser. I don't think they're going to spend a lot of money on tight end, but there are some interesting options. I just feel like given, they don't use the tight end a heck of a lot, so I don't see them really trying to spend huge money on it either. So I think replenishing the offense with some younger talent on the offensive line would be the way to go here. And then adding a number 3 receiver, that's where you could maybe add a veteran, right? So maybe you look to wide receiver for a slot guy like Crowder, I brought up a bunch of times. Maybe this is a team that targets Juju. He's still younger. Maybe they target Christian Kirk or Russell Gage or Emmanuel Sanders, who's older, obviously. Braxton Berrios is another guy that they could target. So I'd look for a slot guy, preferably younger, but doesn't have to be younger. Given that this team is still sort of in contention, I think the main place to get younger is on the offensive line. Defensively, Jeffrey Simmons is a stud. Denico Autry was a nice find for them. Bud Dupree, they spent a lot of money on, which I still don't like that move, even though he's played okay. Linebacker, I think they're probably going to let go of Rashaan Evans, potentially also Jayon Brown. I'd like to have one of those guys back if I'm the Titans. Harold Landry is the priority, though. Keeping Harold Landry with Jeffrey Simmons is the priority. Kevin Byard in the back end. Corner is going to be a position I don't think they do a lot at because Christian Fulton, Elijah Molden, and who's the kid they drafted in the first round? Caleb Farley. I think those guys are going to be their future, so I think they're going to keep those 3 and not really spend a ton on corner. So I think they're looking towards linebacker and, maybe safety. But I think mostly you're looking at younger offensive line, a 3rd receiver, maybe a tight end, linebacker. That's really it. They don't have a ton of money. They're kind of just trying to fill the holes of what they've had and preferably trying to take some of those older guys that are going to leave and make those guys a little bit younger. And I think that's the way to go for the Titans. All right, next, to end the AFC South, we've got the Jacksonville Jags. Is everybody still with me here live? Thank you guys for watching, by the way. If you haven't already, make sure you do Gronk spike that like button. We got the Jacksonville Jaguars. So the Jacksonville Jags are next. Where is Jacksonville? Jacksonville. So Jacksonville. All right. Jacksonville is obviously one of the weaker teams in the NFL from a roster perspective. Number 1 pick last year. Not great in terms of how they performed last year. There is concern about Trevor Lawrence. Hopefully the solution at coach is there with Doug Peterson, who can get some better out of Trevor Lawrence. So I think the number 1 priority for the Jacksonville Jags is helping Trevor Lawrence. And I think the best way to help Trevor Lawrence is get him a number 1 wide receiver. So for Jacksonville, you could do this through the draft. You could also do this through free agency. Now, because you have Trevor Lawrence, is an enticing name for wide receivers out there. You could try to go for Adams and Godwin and Williams and Gallup and try to bring back DJ Chark, who I thought was playing well early in the year before he got hurt. Those guys should all be targeted by Jacksonville. Trying to find that number one wide receiver, to me, is the top priority for Trevor Lawrence. Somebody that he can rely on, that he can throw to in the red zone on third down. Huge. Now, on top of that, you're looking to secure your left tackle spot. This could be achieved in free agency with Teron Armstead, with Trent Brown, with Orlando Brown. This could also be achieved through the draft as well. I think you let Andrew Norwell walk given his age. You've also got to factor in that Walker Little, you picked in the second round last year, could take over at left tackle or right tackle. You could also use an upgrade at right tackle with Jawan Taylor, but you probably just let that slide for now. Offensive line, though, is going to need some money spent there and some capital spent in the draft. But number one wide receiver and then left tackle. Those are the two top things. You've got running backs. You've got complementary players. You've got some offensive linemen. Tight end would be nice. Like Mike Goseki would be a nice addition here for this team. I feel like a move tight end that can also, make a difference in the receiving game would be awesome. Dalton Schultz could be a target as well. Those two top tight ends could also get contracts from Jacksonville. Defensively, you need a pass rusher to complement Josh Allen. Linebacker Miles Jack is good. Other than that, though, you could use a little bit of an upgrade, but that's not like a pressing need, especially I think in this system. Preferably, you moved on from Joe Schobert last year, and that was because I don't think they wanted a huge amount of capital in the linebacker position. So they went cheaper with Damian Wilson, who's a free agent. They could bring him back if they like. But I think getting an edge rusher to complement Josh Allen is big, and getting secondary players, corners, safeties. And number one corner would be awesome if you want to go get Carlton Davis or a J.C. Jackson. You've got the money to do so, and that would be a huge difference maker. Now, you already have Shaq Griffin, who actually played really well for you last year. Safety could also, I think safety is probably more likely where they attack, just given that there's more of them, and they need a safety, I think, a little bit more than they need corner, to be honest. I do like Cisco, is it? Andre, I can't speak. Andre Cisco, who they drafted from Syracuse last year, I think is a player, but they could go after Marcus Williams. They could go after Marcus May, still in their primes. Justin Reed, these guys are all playmakers at safety that could be massive upgrades at free safety specifically. So corner or safety, they're going to get one big player. They need to. They need to try at least. And one edge rusher. And there's a lot of edge rushers out there as well. And Jacksonville hasn't been shy in the past for going after front seven players. So players like Chandler Jones, who's like a hired gun out there, Randy Gregory, Emmanuel Ogbah, Hassan Reddick, Harold Landry. I would try to go for guys that are younger still, Nwosu. Maybe Lorenzo Carter would fit this defense fairly well, but I'm looking more for that tandem with Josh Allen. So somebody dynamic, somebody that's a threat, somebody that can get to the quarterback. Maybe a veteran. So Jacksonville, they're kind of like the Jets to me. They have some good, they have some bad. They're not unfixable, but you've got to hit the top end playmakers. The problem with the Jags right now is they've got a lot of solid and they don't have a lot of great. They need a great receiver. They need a great left tackle. They need great corner, great safety. They need more playmakers. They've got a lot of solid. They need more great. And that's what I'd be looking to do, is probably looking to spend more money on a select few rather than a large sum of players. That's just the way I look at it for Jacksonville this year, because last year they attacked a lot of the depth, a lot of resurfacing and restructuring the depth. Now is the time to get some studs to surround Trevor Lawrence. That's just my opinion. So that's the AFC South. What's going on, Natasha? Nice to see you once again. We're going to finish off with the AFC West. And I'm getting a little thirsty here. All right. The Kansas City Chiefs. So we've got the Kansas City Chiefs. Offensively, the Kansas City Chiefs, we know, are dynamic and a threat every time they step onto the field. Tackle position is their biggest need, as both of their tackles are free agents, Wiley and obviously Orlando Brown. They want to keep Orlando Brown. It makes all the sense in the world to keep Orlando Brown. I don't think he's necessarily a absolute stud, but he is a younger tackle who's about the same age as your quarterback that's going to be there for about 10 years and can protect the blind side of Patrick Mahomes. That is very important. So sign him to whatever you can and whatever works for your team. But Orlando Brown's the biggest priority without a doubt. Now, I'll swear on offense, right? It would be nice to get an upgrade at right tackle, and I think you guys can, because you are the Chiefs, and this is the good thing about being the Chiefs, is I feel like a lot of just, veteran tackles will want to play with Patrick Mahomes. So Morgan Moses, somebody like that, maybe you get Jason Peters for one more year. Or you could go younger at the position as well. But yeah, I would be trying to go for one of these older guys that might be looking to play for a Super Bowl type thing at the right tackle position and securing Orlando Brown at left tackle. Wide receiver, they need a third receiver. Demarcus Robinson and Byron Pringle are both free agents. Neither of them are really a number 3 receiver. They're more like number 4s. Thank you, Natasha, so much, by the way, for the $10. I really appreciate it. She says, appreciate my favorite YouTuber. Thank you so much. Wide receiver position. So number 3, I think Juju makes a lot of sense. I think what they need is a inside receiver that can move the first downs, just convert first downs on third down, get the tough yards, maybe work in the screen game, pitch in as a blocker. That just seems like Juju to me. Juju would make a ton of sense for this team. Maybe you try to take, a swing at Antonio Brown. I think this is a team that might work for. If you could get Allen Robinson on an affordable contract, maybe you look that way. But I wouldn't necessarily be looking at Michael Gallup. I think you've got enough speed. You've got Hill, you've got Hardman. I'd be looking at the inside guys. Juju, Crowder, Emmanuel Sanders, who else? Those type of guys. Even a Rashard Higgins on a 1-year, $3 million contract, I'd be trying to sign that guy. I think that's an upgrade over Demarcus Robinson. Any of those type of players, you could also look to the draft for this as well. Running back, I'd try to keep Jerick McKinnon if I could. I don't think you need to make a huge move there, but trying to re-sign him would be nice on a 1-year deal. Defensively is where you need a lot of work because a lot of people are free agents. Specifically on the defensive line, maybe you try to bring back Melvin Ingram, but if you don't, maybe you go for a little bit more expensive on the D-line, on the edge, because Frank Clark hasn't really worked out. Now, he's still under contract. Not sure what they're going to do there, but Chris Jones is also there. Melvin Ingram's a free agent. Jerron Reed's a free agent. Alex Okafor is a free agent. Derek Nondi's a free agent. All those guys played big roles for you. So both in the inside and on the perimeter, you need pass rushers. So this is a team that I wouldn't be surprised if they targeted, Jadeveon Clowney, the Justin Houstons, the Jerry Hugheses, the JPPs, the older guys that still maybe got a little bit of a spark, or the low-key free agents like the Dante Fowlers, the Tack McKinleys. These are the guys that the Chiefs usually target, and that's the way that I see them going again. I don't think they're going to go for a big name because I don't think they have enough money. Linebacker, I actually think they're in a good place with Bolton and Gay, and just adding depth from there would be nice. Tarvarius Ward's probably going to get a better contract elsewhere. He's probably gone. I would want to keep Tyrann Mathieu, though, and I would want to keep Mike Hughes. I think if you went into next year with your 3 corners as Fenton, Hughes, and Snead, you would be fine. And then you could add from the draft. Get rid of Daniel Sorensen, no matter what you do. Go into next year with Tyrann Mathieu and Juan Thornhill and rookie at safety. You could also bring in a veteran safety to be your third safety to replace Daniel Sorensen. And there's lots of guys, candidates for that. Somebody like Daron Harmon, you could grab him. Reliable, won a lot of big games, makes big plays. That type of guy as your third safety would be a huge upgrade over Daniel Sorensen. But really, I think for the Chiefs, third receiver, tackle, D-line with older veterans, retain Tyrann Mathieu, retain Mike Hughes, and that's pretty much it. Now, the areas where I think they can, they're not going to get a lot better. I think where they're going to get better is probably receiver. If you could go into next year with just more depth at playmaker, that would be nice. And I don't think your defense is going to get a lot better. It sucks, but I just don't think they have enough money or draft picks to be able to cover everything. So, yeah, that's how I see the Chiefs. I think as long as you got Mahomes, you got a pretty good foundation on the O-line, you've got some playmakers on defense. Hopefully your linebackers could take a step forward next year. You'll be good next year, there's no doubt. I just don't know if they're going to be better on defense. I do think they're going to be better on offense next year, though. I do have a feeling about that. The Denver Broncos. Now, obviously, this one is really, really difficult. The Denver Broncos is tough because I don't know if they're going to trade for Aaron Rodgers, which obviously is a huge game changer in their offseason plan. Obviously, right? So the Denver Broncos. Let's talk about if you get Aaron Rodgers and if you don't get Aaron Rodgers. So if you get Aaron Rodgers, try to sign Devontae Adams. Period. If you don't get Aaron Rodgers, don't try to sign Devontae Adams. Period. But Aaron Rodgers. Okay, so let's say you got Aaron Rodgers. Offensive line needs to be addressed. So Bobby Massey is a free agent. And you've got Bowles. I like him. Cushenberry improved. The guards are not terrible. I don't think you're terrible on the offensive line. You could be worse. You've got a lot of players on IR that I'm trying to see if you're missing anybody here. Dalton Reisner as well is still on the team. He was hurt. So the offensive line is actually fairly solid. I think right tackle could use an upgrade. That might be a place where you draft somebody. You might want to bring back Bobby Massey, who wasn't bad as a swing tackle, aka also known as a third tackle, maybe your starter with a younger guy trying to take his place. With Aaron Rodgers, I think he can make an offensive line that's average a lot better. But with a weaker quarterback, your offensive line needs to be better, right? The quarterback position, obviously, Rodgers. Tight end, Noah Fant. No question, he's still there. And I actually like the backup. He's okay. Javonte Williams, I'd move on from Melvin Gordon, who is a free agent, so I'd just let him walk. Instead of that, I would look to maybe just draft somebody. I don't think I'd be all over signing a free agent. Maybe if Rodgers is there, you could get a free agent for cheap, like Sony Michel or somebody like J.D. McKissick as a receiving back. You could go that way if you want. I think if Rodgers is there, you could get guys that maybe a lot cheaper. So honestly, offensively, everything's in place for you. Aaron Rodgers or not Aaron Rodgers, you don't have much to add. It's really quarterback, and then right tackle, and then that's really it. You're hoping Jerry Jeudy takes a step forward as a receiver. If he doesn't, you might have to look to receiver next year, but that's not yet, right? Defensively is where you need to do some work, because defensively you could maybe regress, which is not good, because Vic Fangio's gone, and I think he's a big part of their success defensively. So defensively, we'll get back to quarterback as well. If they don't get Aaron Rodgers, I'll go through alternative routes. So defensive line on the interior. Shelby Harris is good. Mike Purcell, Dramonte Jones, Draymond Jones. Those guys are solid. You could bring in another interior defensive lineman. Another difference maker would be like Akeem Hicks. That would be maybe if you're trying to go all in. But I they're trying to retain the same sort of defensive scheme. So you need the same sort of players. So I think your interior is not bad, but you weren't good versus the run. So maybe looking for one run stuffer wouldn't be a terrible idea. But I do feel like a lot of that was to do with the fact that you played a lot of two safeties deep. So the defense really, I think it was more kind of, if this makes sense, it was more like schematically the reason you were weak against the run than personnel, if that makes sense. I could be wrong there, but that's just my opinion. Now, Bradley Chubb's a stud. Malik Reed is solid. I think you could add to Malik Reed on the edge with a veteran. I don't think they're going to try to go all out for like Chandler Jones. I've seen that, though. And Von Miller. I've seen, a reunion there, which if he wants to, sure. But they could go the guy from the Rams, what's his name? Ronka. That guy, he's good. He's like a good number 3. I don't know how to say his name. I just call him Oscar. So that guy. And then we got, who else we got? I don't think they're going to be able to get like a Hassan Reddick, but that would be a good fit. Harold Landry, same thing. Good fit, maybe too expensive. Nwosu, Lorenzo Carter, Jacob Martin. It would be nice to have another guy there, though. And then you've got linebackers. I think Johnson would be nice. Johnson would be nice to have back, I think. And for some reason, Broncos fans, I think, underrate him a little bit, but I think Johnson would be very nice to have back. Or at least Josie Jewell. Either one would be nice to have back because I think without them, you're a little bit weak at this position. Browning's okay. Kenny Young actually played fairly well in this defense. So maybe you bring him back too. But inside linebacker is not a massive need as long as you retain one of those players. And then really it's the secondary, which Jake brought up. It's big time in the secondary because Kyle Fuller's a free agent. Bryce Callahan's a free agent. So those two are two of your starting 3 corners. And then Ronald Darby is, I don't think, a free agent. So when you look at it, you've got the young kid from the 3rd round. What's his name? Michael Amudier. He's okay. So maybe he plays a larger role. But you've got, who's the junior? The junior. What's the junior kid's name? The junior. I can't remember his name. Oh, Surtain. So you've got him. He's a stud. So you got him on one side. You've got Darby on the other, probably, unless you cut him. Then you got Amudier, but you need a nickel corner. So maybe you bring back Bryce Callahan. You could do that. You could also look to like a Mackenzie Alexander from the Vikings. You could look maybe at... I wouldn't be surprised if they signed Darius Williams from the Rams. Same defense. Makes sense. Who else? Maybe the draft. I don't think Kyle Fuller is going to be back, to be honest with you. Yeah, I'm not sure. I would just re-sign Bryce Callahan. If it was me, I'd just re-sign Bryce Callahan and then have Darby on one side and Surtain on the other and Amudier as your number 4. Then who else do you got there? But that's a pretty good depth chart, honestly. Justin Simmons, you might have to bring in a safety. So you might have to have somebody to replace Kareem Jackson. You could probably afford Kareem Jackson, but he's regressed quite a bit. Who could replace Kareem Jackson? You could go for... I don't know. This one's tough, actually. Maybe the draft. I've mentioned a lot of these guys for other teams, but I don't see anybody that immediately I know like fits this system. So, yeah, I'm not exactly sure about safety, but you could use a safety to replace Kareem Jackson, and maybe you go younger at that position. But Justin Simmons is obviously going to be there. So, really, when you look at the Broncos, they're really good. from a roster perspective, they need a quarterback. A quarterback would do a lot for this team. So quarterback's number one. If you don't get Aaron Rodgers, I don't think the draft is a real solution for this team. I would be looking, and I've said, my bargain quarterback of this offseason is Gardner Minshew. Honestly, that would be an upgrade over Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater. If you want to go cheap, and then you could kind of like fix the rest of your team. If you want to go with somebody a little bit more proven, you could go trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, which would make sense because he's played in a similar offense to what Hackett runs, right? So that would make sense. I'm not sure Mariota would be great. I think he'd be okay. I feel like I'd rather have... Jimmy makes the most sense to me. But after Jimmy and Minshew, I think Minshew's a great fit too. And then after that, I think who's a great fit? You got Winston, maybe Trubisky. Trubisky actually to me would make sense. He's got a little bit of mobility. He's younger. Maybe you take a chance on him. And then you kind of have Locke and Trubisky fight it out. You could go that way for a year and then maybe you draft one next year sort of thing. If that doesn't work, I think I prefer Trubisky over Mariota. But yeah, that's the way that I look at this team. I think right tackle, obviously quarterback, secondary big time, maybe inside linebacker, maybe D-line, maybe edge. But the Broncos are going to be very interesting, starting with what do they do at quarterback. The Las Vegas Raiders. Before I talk about the Las Vegas Raiders, Natasha has a question. Mitch says, Mitch, what team would you recommend watching in the NFC? Oh, man, as many as you can. I really like watching the Niners, so I'll just say the Niners. But the Super Bowl champs are the Rams, so maybe watch some Rams games. The Las Vegas Raiders. Oh, yeah, Russ would be nice too, obviously. The Las Vegas Raiders. We've got two more teams, guys. Just two more. Maybe with the NFC, I'll be a little bit quicker. But the Raiders. So offensively, this is a Josh McDaniels scheme now. So a lot is going to change with this team in terms of personnel. I think more so they're going to change on defense. I think really their offense is pretty good, and they don't have a lot to change. I think they've got the core pieces there. They've got Colton Miller at left tackle, who's good. They've got Hunter Renfrow at slot receiver. They've got Bryan Edwards on the outside. They've got Darren Waller at tight end. Those are all keys. Josh Jacobs is the first and second down back. Maybe they try to sign James White away from New England to play in this offense as the third down back, who could also kind of teach the offense to everybody because he's just that smart. That might be a way that McDaniels tries to go, and I wouldn't be surprised by that. The offensive line does need some work. I think Andre James is solid. He'll stay put. Leatherwood is probably going to get a year at right guard, but they're going to need to look at right tackle. I wouldn't be surprised if McDaniels tries to steal Trent Brown away, to be honest with you. Ted Karras is another guy that they could try to take from New England on the offensive line at guard and tackle. Then you look at other guards, I think that would fit McDaniels' system. Alex Kappa is one of them from the Bucs. I feel like I don't think they're going to go massive on the guard this offseason. Let's check tackle. I think they'll be in on Trent Brown, but I'm not sure they'll try to sign him necessarily. But they might try to, maybe they look at Nate Solder, a guy from the past, Cornelius Lucas, Brandon Shell, just to slightly upgrade. But that might be the draft. Typically New England has drafted offensive linemen. So if they don't go with like Trent Brown, a big ticket item, they might go with the draft at right tackle. But otherwise, the offensive line is fine. I don't think it's great, but I don't think it's terrible either. They could use some speed at wide receiver, in which case they might go with a trade. I mentioned Brandon Cooks. I do think wide receivers, they are interested in Devontae Adams. From everything we hear, Devontae Adams played with Derek Carr in college. They could be in on him. I think that would be awesome. I think Allen Robinson makes sense, although he's not the fastest. He's a good all-around receiver. Odell makes sense for the Raiders. DJ Chark, Will Fuller. These guys make sense if you want to add a vertical element. Hey, maybe even T.Y. Hilton. Those guys could add a little bit of speed to the wide receiver position and open up things for Hunter Renfrow. And honestly, the offense is good. And Derek Carr is there still. Marcus Mariota, let him go, sign somewhere else. Defensively, I think the defense is going to change drastically. Very new defense, getting away from Gus Bradley's Seattle scheme, more towards Belichick defense. So it's going to be a lot more hybrid, edge, linebacker type players. So KJ Wright is going to be gone. Quentin Jefferson is going to be gone. Probably Jonathan Hankins as well. Maybe you re-sign Solomon Thomas. Not sure. But I think you've got a good foundation of Max Crosby, Yannick Ngakoue, Carl Nassib. Maybe they trade Colin Farrell. I wouldn't be surprised if they did that. Big D linemen. They could bring in big D linemen. One of them being maybe Calais Campbell. That's a guy that I think would make sense. Who else here? Calais Campbell, Akeem Hicks would make a lot of sense. BJ Hill would make a lot of sense as well. Sheldon Richardson would make sense. And even Ndamukong Suh. So those guys are guys to watch out for the inside of that defensive line and free agency. They could also look to the draft. Again, New England loves to draft those type of players too. So when I'm saying New England, I'm referring to Vegas, but it's basically the same. The GM and the coach is from New England. So that's kind of the way that they think. Then you got linebackers. Perryman's still on the team. I think they'll keep him. Diablo. Corey Littleton's going to be gone. They could use a linebacker or two. Maybe they try to get Hightower, but I don't know. Maybe they draft one. I don't think there's a ton in free agency for them to go for. I think the most important thing they do, though, is upgrade the secondary on defense. And I think most importantly, I don't think their safeties. Morig is a good free safety. I think they'll be fine there. Abram, they could try at strong safety and have that young duo at free and strong. And then corner, I think, is really important. So I think Mullen fits. And I think Nate Hobbs isn't a bad player. But they could use one more corner. So I think they're going to go hard for a corner. And it might be J.C. Jackson. It might be Carlton Davis. Might be Stephon Gilmore. Might be Charvarius Ward. But I think they need one pretty big-time corner to pair up on the outside. Casey Hayward will be gone. He doesn't fit the system. So they've got a nice edge duo with Crosby and Yannick Ngakoue. They've got a nice free safety, couple decent corners, but I think you're going to see a lot of movement on this defense, specifically in the middle of their defense and in the corner position. And then offensively, speed at receiver and a right tackle. And honestly, the Raiders are pretty well set up with Derek Carr. He's a good player. And McDaniels, I think, will upgrade their offense schematically. Darren Waller being healthier will be nice. Hunter Renfrow really entering his prime, which I think is one of the most undervalued receivers in the game. And I think they'll get more out of Josh Jacobs in this scheme as well. So the Raiders, I don't think you should sleep on them. I know that they were kind of like a Cinderella team last year, but I do think they're definitely a team to take seriously next year as well. Derek Carr is playing some of his best football of his career, so they'll be pretty good. And then you've got the Los Angeles Chargers, and I think this is fitting that we're finishing with them here tonight, because the Los Angeles Chargers are the team that I feel like could make the most, or do the most, and make the most damage this free agency. The Los Angeles Chargers have a ton of money, and they also have some needs that are pressing, but they have Justin Herbert. And Justin Herbert is one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's going to be one of the 3 best quarterbacks probably for the next decade. And they could be a Super Bowl contending team if they make the right moves. One of those moves, believe it or not, I think is moving on from Mike Williams. I don't think they should re-sign Mike Williams to a massive contract. If he's affordable and he gets decent money, but not like top tier wide receiver 1 money, then that's fine. But I think they should go for a different receiver and maybe even draft one. They have Keenan Allen still, but I would rather them get 2 receivers in free agency than just Mike Williams, or get a rookie and a receiver in free agency, or a tight end like Mike Goseki over Mike Williams. Rashawn Slater's a stud at left tackle. They're good there. Matt Filer at left guard, solid. Corey Linsley is very good at center. They need to improve their right side of their offensive line. I don't think they're really going to be able to do that in free agency at tackle. I think they might have to draft another tackle unless they could steal, Dwayne Brown or just spend a ton of money on Teron Armstead. They could do that potentially. But there are also value guys like Brandon Shell, Riley Reif, Eric Fisher, Cornelius Lucas. These guys could come in and be an upgrade. Dennis Kelly could all be an upgrade for right tackle. Right guard, Michael Schofield isn't terrible. They could certainly do worse than him. But there are a bunch of guards that they could bring in that I feel like are low-key. Mark Lewinsky, even Quinton Spain. But Ted Karras, bring back Michael Schofield. But I think they mostly need a right tackle. And then a tight end over Jared Cook. Like, if they could get Mike Goseki, I think that would be perfect landing spot for them. They have Austin Eckler. I think they're fine at running back. Maybe they draft a secondary option. Defensively, they could use an edge rusher. I think where most of their money will be spent is on defense. Outside of the offensive line, edge rusher, I think they could use an upgrade on the opposite side of Joey Bosa. Maybe they go after a veteran like Chandler Jones or Von Miller. That would make sense to me. I also think they could use a difference maker on the inside. So maybe Calais Campbell or Akeem Hicks. Maybe they draft one in there. Adding some depth to the front would also be nice. I think their linebackers are fine. I think they're not terrible. I think they should bring back White if they can. Drew Tranquil is fine. He just gets hurt a lot. Corner position, Michael Davis, Asante Samuel is a good start. I think they should add a third corner. So maybe they try to get Darius Williams, who was really good with the Rams and Staley. They could bring back Chris Harris. I would probably not. They could try to get like JC or Carlton Davis, younger guys that are going to get bigger contracts. Rasul Douglas could make sense, given that he performed well in this scheme in Green Bay. Kyle Fuller would also make sense for the Chargers at corner. Nasir Adderley and Derwin James are good. Maybe you add depth at safety. But, okay, so the overall plan for the Chargers, move on from Mike Williams unless he's coming with a more affordable contract than I feel like, and bring in 2 other receivers that are maybe not as good as Mike Williams, but good players. And then you got sign a right tackle. Whatever you can do, sign a right tackle. Try to get Mike Goseki. Defensively, get a Von Miller or a Chandler Jones or a Akeem Hicks or both. They've got a ton of money. They can do this all. And then you got corner position. Maybe they go nickel corner. Like DJ Reed, Bryce Callahan would make sense. Or they go with an outside guy like Kyle Fuller. They could also do that. But a nice corner would be good as well. But the biggest needs, I think, are right tackle and edge rusher. Maybe interior defensive lineman. But the Chargers have a lot of money, and they have a chance to form Brandon Staley's defense the way that he wants it this offseason. And that's going to be the biggest difference maker, in my opinion, with how much they grow this year from last year. If they can really put together a nice defense for Brandon Staley, along with the Justin Herbert offense, they could be a really, really good team this next season. So they're the team to watch in the AFC. And that is my breakdown for every AFC team and my game plan for every AFC team in the free agency. I know it was long, guys. I appreciate everybody watching and Gronk spiking the like button. If you haven't already, make sure that you do Gronk spike that like button. Thank you guys so much for the super chats and the support and the comments. And thank you guys all for watching the content. I know that, it's kind of an awkward part of the season. We're transitioning to free agency. So thank you for the support. It means a lot. And we're going to continue to grind out this content. So Let me know if you guys want anything from me, like to see any videos, any specific videos, anything that you think would be fun or interesting from my perspective, obviously. Leave it in that comment section, not live here because I won't be able to see it, but in the comment section below if you have any ideas. Jake asks, am I going to watch the USFL? Maybe a little bit, probably not a lot. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's Mitch, and we will see you tomorrow. I'm not sure what time, probably in the day tomorrow to do the NFC because I'm seeing the Batman at night. So thank you guys for watching. Peace.